Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here coming at you live for another Operation GCD Fridays. And I won't, we'll cut right to the chase, just like my old stalker there and almost PR rep, Buffalo Jared Revisa, when, just like he was cutting things up on his multi state assassin, hypnotic mind control assassin style. Multi-state stabbing spree, murder spree under these transpocalypse conditions we live in today. But anyhow, without any further ado, our guest here tonight, Jacob J, the host of Rise to Liberty and producer for No Way Jose, Already Dead, and you're a busy man, sir. Welcome to Operation GCD, and thank you for joining me today to get a little GCD.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having another JJ on.
Yes, sir. I appreciate conversations with all JJs. I'm also keeping my eye on you, sir. You out there trying to out JJ me.
Hey, man, you're way too unique of a person for me to be able to out JJ.
Yes, sir. That's the fun part about being a JJ. We're all very unique.
Right, right.
So
But yeah, thanks for having me on, dude.
Yes, sir. Well, absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed our discussion we had there on your Rise to Liberty. Was it your 4th anniversary show?
Yes.
2 weeks back?
Yep. 4th anniversary.
Nice.
Been at this for 4 years now. Working on my 5th.
That's awesome, dude. And again, I appreciate it, man, with a lot of details. You, sir, are one of those folks with a lot of details, and you blew up my brain hole with that discussion we had there regarding a couple of topics we'll get into tonight. And as I guarantee folks here at the interwebs, thank you all again for joining me here tonight to get a little GCD. We got a real barn burner here on deck because Jacob J here was, first of all, when you're telling me about new things I don't know about Iran-Contra money laundering and, Colby's queers, that is, Bill Colby's queers, the folks that have brought these Operation Gladio, Phoenix program, and Air America drug trafficking programs come home. I had no idea that Daryl Gates, the former head of LAPD, and his DARE program was encapsulated in that same conversation. So,
yes, sir.
That's off you,
yes,
sir.
Yeah, he is all involved in it. And just in case nobody really knows, Daryl Gates is a really influential figure.
For sure.
He started SWAT. So
he did, for sure. He's very well known too in that community.
Right. It's just massive. He was head chief of police for the LAPD. Really high up position in a really large city. But also he is the founder and the head guy of the DARE program, which many people usually don't know. And this is actually his involvement with the LAPD is really where he got his involvement in the intelligence agency, right? He basically created his own. At the time when he was chief of police, he started a couple of intelligence organizations within the LAPD. And it got to the point where he was sending LAPD officers all over the world. And eventually, he's doing intelligence work, and eventually you're going to run into other spooks, and so the FBI and CIA get wind of this, and they, throw their hands up like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? You're stepping on our toes. And
yeah, and I think that's a great point, if I may, sir. One thing I like to highlight here is how all of these intelligent agencies, or I call them unintelligence agencies, they all want to get their hands in the same pot. They all want to play in the same field, and they're all stepping on each other's toes. And you pointed out, even the LAPD is forming sending folks around the world doing intelligence operations.
Right.
And I often wonder if one of those folks was Mark Furman, because we look at these networks you're describing with Daryl Gates and how he's integrated into the Iran-Contra money laundering back to his military operations.
Right. And I mean, it's entirely possible. I mean, the CIA, FBI are thick in LA County and LA City. So, it's really, really interesting. But what gets even more interesting is, so Daryl Gates, at the time when he was still in charge of the LAPD, he was getting officers into the school, undercover officers, like 21 Jump Street style, right?
And that's some like real Stasi. Like if you were just to
Right.
like tell anyone here in America the East Germans were doing that, or West, disregard the West Germans, whatever Germans you want to go with in the scenario. The Stasi, for example, specifically, you could folks would believe that. But you start saying
Right.
those same principles and concepts have been going on here in America with folks like the LAPD and Daryl Gates. They're like, whoa, buddy, that's some commie bullshit you're telling me right there. But it's not.
Right.
The commie bullshit is the folks that are doing these things, right?
Exactly. And I mean, what at least officially what they were saying that they were doing is they were going after drugs and drug dealers. Well, turns out when they actually got into the schools, drugs were not as big of a problem as they thought they were. And of course, they did do some drug busting as well. I mean, obviously. But the thing is, it just wasn't as big of a problem as they thought it was going to be. And so the need for as many officers as they had in the schools, like it was completely overblown. They had way more officers in there.
Oh, for sure, dude. And it's part and parcel of this program, right? So it's again
Right.
when I'm saying some Nazi shit, like you're having some kids narc out their parents, right? So suddenly, you have a network right there. You're building distrust in the system. It goes hand in hand with the war on drugs, right? And the same war on drugs that the guy who's creating this program. This is where you blew up my brain hole, sir. Because if you think about it, if you look at it, you got the guy here who's creating this war on drugs program within the schools with Dare. He's literally running a conduit for the drug running money laundering operations for Iran-Contra business.
Right. And so it's even like more wild than that. So back when he started the whole SWAT thing, like one of the big things he got known for, Daryl Gates, is basically doing a no-knock raid on the Black Panthers. That was a big thing. And apparently, from that side of things, like it was like perfectly executed. It was just like the shining example of how to do no-knock raids. Apparently they didn't even have a search warrant at the time. They ended up getting one retroactively.
You're making some excellent points there, because he fundamentally changed a lot of law enforcement operations,
right,
with SWAT, with the armament and equipment being used, and even the protocols, like you're saying, no-knock raids. That wasn't a thing before then.
right. So he does this, and then what's wild is he gets kind of in trouble for it a little later on, even though he's still getting a ton of praise. But what ended up happening is he switched his focus from doing some of the SWAT stuff, even though he was still involved with it, but he focused on creating dossiers on people. And he did this with there were two intelligence groups within the LAPD. I can't remember the acronyms off the top of my head, but they were basically.
I think it was Dick, the Dick department, because these people are all dicks.
Right. Yeah, the DIC.
Yeah, the DIC, right? He's the head dick in charge of the dick.
I mean, hey, I'll go with it. And it's interesting. So he ended up creating all these dossiers. Well, eventually the California Supreme Court got wind of this, and they put a stop to it. Well, sort of. They came in and told him, like, look, you can't do this. So what they found when they did their investigation.
You can't run international intelligence operations, sir. You're the chief of Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, PD, not even the county.
Right. Like, you were way overstepping your bounds. He got pissed, obviously, because the dude's a narcissist. And also, apparently, from like, if you go watch any interviews about anyone who worked with him, everyone says the same thing, that he was super paranoid. And so when the state of California, when they're when they did their investigation, they found out that this man had actually gathered like 1.2 million dossiers on people. And it's just literally just anybody at that point. I mean, it's like, who the hell are you gathering dossiers on? Obviously it started with key influential figures in the underground, or in, the criminal underground, lots of Black Panthers. And of course, you didn't even have to do anything necessarily. If you were just involved with somebody, you were going to be surveilled. And
Oh, for
so,
sure, dude. Well, that's part of the game, right? If they can't,
right,
so they got to create. They got to create. Folks to surveil. But it's what I like to point out is a former assistant director or associate director of the FBI, Thomas Fuentes. I'll find the clip here. Back in 2004, says in a documentary, when he's making a budget for an agency, a law enforcement agency such as the FBI, he's never going to claim that they solved all the crime or they stopped all the terrorism, because that would reduce his budget. So he
right,
operates under the pretense or the thought process when establishing a budget for the FBI, which he did. That was his job as the associate director, is to keep fear alive. Just like keep hope
right,
alive, but keep fear alive. So if they can't find terrorists, they'll make a terrorist, right? And I'm not saying they'll
right.
go out there and find a hopeless Islamic fellow or a retarded fellow, which they do a lot of those kind of deals, right? But they'll just go and dude. After 9/11, dude, there was an incident in the San Francisco Bay Area. I think it was Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department. Speaking of these, commie California business, dude, they had infiltrated an old lady book club because they sent an undercover officer in there because they were anti-war and they were talking shit about,
Oh,
Iraqistan, Afghanistan war. So what's an old lady book club have to do with anything, dude? But that's where
right.
these programs go, though. That's a good example.
Damn
The
those old blue-haired
logical end,
gays.
right? Yeah. Those damn AARP citizens, they're a real
Right.
problem around here.
Right. God forbid they are anti-war, because they've probably lived through plenty of them and seen the devastation that gets caused by it, you know?
You ain't kidding, dude. Because for the last 70 years here in America, that's what it's been. Every 10 years, we got to do war stuff. So I think
Right.
that's a good point. I didn't want to go too far, but we've done a good introduction to some of the material you discuss over there at
Yeah,
Rise to
for sure.
Liberty. And if you can give any plugs and any introductions to your show there, sir, before we get any farther here tonight.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, I'm a parapolitical researcher. Um, and like you said, I host my own show, Rise to Liberty. You can find me literally anywhere, whether it's YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, all the places. I'm most active Instagram, Telegram, and Twitter or X, whatever. But I have a focus on MK Ultra and mind control. Those are the things that I focus on the most, because I think that mind control, behavior modification, these things, they kind of fall into everything. It's just kind of involved with everything, and it affects every single one of us. I don't know another topic that really affects people as much as mind control does, whether it's the individual or the masses. And so I've kind of just honed in on that. But of course, I do focus on other topics. Satanic ritual abuse is a big topic for me, especially living here in the state of Utah. It's a big
Oh, the
deal
great
here.
state of Utah, the nation of
Right.
Deseret, as they call it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely love this state. However, there is a massive satanic faction in this state that has their claws in many things, along with the UN New World Order stuff going on, with all the upgraded surveillance state stuff that we have going on here. We have the
Oh, sure,
NSA,
dude.
DHS.
Yeah, a lot of
Just
folks
all
don't know
sorts of
about that
things.
Dugway Proving Grounds NSA facility that
Right.
they've been constructing out there, right? That's a major data center.
Right. Well, and so check this out. Dugway Proving Grounds, one of the locations for the Edgewood arsenal testing that they did for chemical and biological radiological testing during MK Ultra in the during the 60s. They tested a lot of it out here. This was actually the like field test. So after they did all the lab tests, they came out here to Utah. The reason why Dugway Proving Grounds is 800,000 square miles, and it's the size of Rhode Island, basically.
Yep.
And it's an entire military base. They've got a lot of things out there. They test new safety equipment. They test all sorts of bombs and armory.
Yep.
Um,
That's where it's not far from Salt Lake City, right? It's about an hour and a half
right.
south of there, right?
Well, it's
That's
about 50 minutes.
and that's where Hill Air Force Base is located in Salt Lake City, the mothership,
Yep.
as I call it.
Yep,
And
just
for the
north
Mormons.
just north of Salt Lake, actually.
And they do a lot of
So,
testing. That's part of the Air Force Material Command. So they do all the
yes,
testing within
sir.
that command. So that Hill Air Force Base is a major epicenter of these kind of weird testing. Testings of all anything that gets tested within that command. For example, Air Force Material Command. I test wore some uniforms one time when I was stationed within that command because the Air Force was changing uniforms to these weird blue uniforms, dude. They were really dumb looking. But I had to wear that uniform for like 6 months because I was in that command.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. Also, Hill Air Force Base runs support for ICBM missiles. And so, we're in constant communication with NORAD and all of the missile silos all over the country. So Hill and Dugway are both two major military bases, and I find it interesting because there's all sorts of things. Of course, we are the foundation, the head place for the Mormon Church, the LDS Church, but also we are one of the main locations for Best Friends Animal Society, which is the process church of the final
There you
judgment.
go, sir. There you go, sir. I was gonna address that. Do you know? Because they're located down in Kanab, right down southern Utah.
Correct. Yep. Which is just a little bit east of a little bit northeast of St. George. So yeah, it's
And when we're speaking these matters of the NSA or these other spooky kind of testing stuff over the years, Dugway Proving Grounds, etc., it shouldn't be ignored that this Mormon fellow right here, Major General Brent Scowcroft, who died a few years back here in August, about 5 years ago, he was the right hand man to Henry Kissinger and the national security apparatus here in America. That Nazi apparatus that took over America in 1947 and eradicated freedom of speech. I'm sure, as a libertarian-minded individual, sir, I'm sure you're well aware of these matters, that the National Security Act of 1947 and Nazi Act eradicated free speech in America because folks like Brent Scowcroft, Kissinger, and a small handful of other folks can stamp things national security, and no one has to know anything else about it.
Right. And that's, it's really interesting anytime you see matters of national security pop up, such as the Idaho murders. When you told me that
now you're talking my language, sir.
Right. As soon as you told me that those were labeled a matter of national security, first of all, I said, "Hold up, wait a minute." Like you're telling
Not
me this
only
is
that, and more recent, so they did that a couple years ago with all the seal and everything, and even like the victims' parents were told it was national security shit. So and in more recent times, literally a week before the sudden guilty plea of Brian Kohberger back at the beginning of July, the judge denied. He just denied everything the defense filed anyway, just out of principle, just deny it. I'm going to read it, kind of deal. But he cited, this is a state court. He cited a case again. The defense was trying to argue alternate perpetrators. He cited denying them that right, citing the McVeigh case with John Doe number 2 is the citation why they're not allowed to argue this. How does that? First of all, I'm not an attorney. I'm also not the vice president, but you can't. Federal rulings have no bearing in state court.
Right. Especially a federal case that took place in another state. If they're citing
dude, that's what I'm saying. So we're seeing this facade of a state hearings, but it keeps popping up throughout the case that it's a federal procedures with national security implications all around it. Right. And they even do so when they try to argue alternate perpetrators. Said nope, because that was a big issue, as I'm sure you know, with the OKC stuff with John Doe number 2, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it just, well, first of all, anytime I hear matters of national security, maybe I'm a little biased, but I automatically think CIA, even though it could be more than just them. But I always just go to them because they're my favorite people to point to and blame everything on.
Absolutely, the clowns in America, they're a great kicking post. Right. But you're right, sir. It is, again, it's all 17 unintelligent agencies, and they're not all involved. It's compartmentalized, and they use things under the matters of national security through a team of folks that work in the White House called the National Security Council, where folks like Henry Kissinger here have been running along with his old buddy Brent Scowcroft, the Mormon fellow, who has family in Kanab, Utah. And also Kissinger here has deeply connected to the, processed cocaine Bob Evans here for many decades. No one could explain their friendship. Lord knows, sir, what went on in this photograph. But when we see this fella who's got, again, you can just there's Scowcrofts in Kanab, Utah today. So they're not
Right.
they're in positions of community positions of leadership and businesses ownership. So
Right. Well,
he
and
it's
just
no
just to
surprise
give
to me
you
that. Oh yes, sir. Go ahead.
just to give you a little background, down there in Kanab, everything, or as everyone says here in Utah, Kanab, but everyone down there
I've been
is,
told that actually that I've pronounced that wrong.
yeah, most people do,
No, I understand because I correct folks on the proper pronunciations of Appalachia all the time, so I
right,
understand these matters.
right. So most people down in that region are actually associated with best friends in one way or another.
Yeah,
And
dude.
so it makes things really interesting because I would say for, you know, for anyone who doesn't know, best friends, it's they pretty much run that town. Um, I wouldn't say so much the county, although they do have their fingers in many pies down there. They definitely run that city. So if Brant here has any family that's left over living down there, they are somehow involved in one way or another with Best Friends Animal Society.
Yeah, dude, you're making some excellent points because I've studied these things economically speaking and politically speaking down there, and the process or Scientology, they're more public. They're the kind of the dark wing of Scientology, if you will.
Right,
And I do think there's a lot of crossovers with their fellow ancient alien cargo cultists, the Mormons, because as I'm
right,
looking at the financial aspects, tracking the logistics, the politics, and in fact also the their corporate documents, it seems there may be some deeper connections there. So it seems
right,
that they list in the corporate documents of the Process Church, which they never changed the corporations. They just changed the name of it throughout the years from
right,
Foundation Faith when they went to the evangelical movement to the Best Friends Animal Society in the 90s. And those corporate documents list a body of an organizational structure known as the Quorum of the 70. And that Quorum of the
right,
70 is a guiding board within their government or their corporate structure. So they don't identify who that is or how to elect this Quorum of the 70. So thereby, I'm to believe it's an outside body. And if that's the case, they just happen to be in the state where there is a corporation of a Quorum of the 70.
right,
At the
right,
mothership, they're the organization of the mothership at Salt Lake City, the Mormons, that runs the entire operation, right?
right, right. Yeah, that's not far off. Basically, I mean, getting into the Mormons. So it's just really interesting. They've got their fingers in everything. Um, Now,
Dude,
my
literally, dude, literally.
yeah, all over the world. I mean, they were cozied up to the UN at this point. And in fact, for a long time, the Mormon Church, all the way through, ever since the conception of the UN, all the way up until about the late 90s, the LDS Church wanted nothing to do with the UN because, in my opinion, even though there was some corruption in the church, there were still people that wanted to have an actual church. Now, my personal opinion is that any of those people are long gone out of positions of power. Obviously, there's still good people within the religion. There's good people in all religions, but anybody who is at the helm, in seats of power within the church at in this day and age, are corrupt as anyone else. It's you. I don't believe that you can be in a position of power
Oh, am I
to
back? I cut out
oh,
there for a second.
cut out there for a sec. I was just cooking, dude. But I don't believe that you can be in a position in any religion at this point in this day and age without being corrupt. And I don't think you have to go too far to see that when you start seeing certain things like the LDS church pushing, the vaccines and masking your kids and all of these different things. I just can't see any, and maybe that's my bias, is seeing things like that. But I just see it as pure corruption at this point. But yeah, for the longest time, they didn't want involvement with the UN because even one of the prophets of the church came out and said that the UN was a satanic organization. But for
I don't
some
think they're
reason,
wrong within some of those respects, right? But it also,
right?
there is these aspects where there's definitely satanic aspects or cults within the Mormon
Oh
religion,
yeah.
and again, the
Oh, there
connections to
are.
the process
Sure.
seems like it may be on its face part of that part and parcel of some of that stuff, but we do see, I think, what you're pointing out, I think, is an internal struggle through a lot of organizations, right? So I think
Right.
one thing that folks often look at, especially here in conspiracy culture worlds on the interwebs, that they look at things like a monolithic thing that's never going to change, when there's folks always vying to take control and power of these organizations that have a lot of money, especially that they can wield through, like the
Right.
Mormons or Scientology, etc. And we see that even with the Vatican. Right now in the Vatican, we have an American Pope of French Protestant backgrounds, and he's got kinfolk that are in the French chapter of the Society of Cincinnati, at least 2 kinfolk cousins.
Right. Right.
So it's an odd circumstance there, because 700 years ago the Pope put down the Knights Templar, and here we got a Templar kinfolk in there.
Right. And so Mormonism, I think, is particularly special in the sense of these cults from within, because there's actually an organization within the LDS Church called the LDS Church of Satan, and
Right.
it is a multi-generational satanic cult that goes all the way back to Brigham Young and the farming of Utah itself. And this is actually one of the things that I've talked about on my channel a lot. There's a case going on here with a man by the name of David Hamblin, who is a former therapist, psychologist, something. I can't remember exactly what he is off the top of my head. But he
I think
was
they pronounce it
accused
kid
by
diddler.
his
I think they pronounce it kid diddler,
yes,
sir.
yes. He was accused by his daughters and many other people of being a member of this organization, the satanic, the LDS Church of Satan. And a lot of these people actually are all over the state, all over the country, actually, but many of them down in Kanab, and also in plenty of other places, Crystal Springs, Utah, down in Cedar City, Utah, of course, Salt Lake City. They're all over the place.
And this
And
involves
some,
very powerful people like David
yes,
Levitt, right? David
yes,
Levitt, the DA who decided not to prosecute this Hamblin fellow, right? Because he was named in the situation,
yeah,
apparently.
decided
He
not to
held a press
prosecute
conference,
in
right,
three
saying
separate times.
3 separate times. That's right. Because these matters kept coming up, and the DA wouldn't prosecute it, because we come to find out later he's been named in these mixes, and we come to find out because he holds a press conference. No one's publicly accused him. David Levitt holds a press conference saying that he and his wife do not diddle nor eat children.
Right.
It's
And
fucking weird, man.
that's actually where I started that story, where I started investigating that story, because that news conference is the strangest thing I've ever listened to. It's actually
yeah, dude. Yeah,
right.
dude.
It's actually uploaded on my channel for anyone that wants to go check it out.
Oh,
The
nice. I was
whole
just going to
press
pull it up. So you
conference.
got on your YouTubes?
I do.
Okay.
And what's interesting, actually, no, I think it got taken down from YouTube, because YouTube, it is on my Rumble though. I know that for sure.
Oh, okay. Well, fair enough. I'll go there. Please continue,
So
sir.
what it was just really interesting. So David Hamblin gets arrested. For anyone who doesn't know, he gets arrested one day. Well, actually, the way
If I
that
may,
this
sir, just to
happens,
give a quick baseline, who David Hamblin is, getting connected to the Levitts. David
yes.
David Levitt's brother was the governor, and David Levitt has been connected to the Podesta Clinton machines of Ukrainian nonprofit operations, not the least of which
Yep.
included trying to kidnap a young native girl from Wyoming.
Well, it wasn't so much a kidnap. He was actually trying to adopt her, and he was actually trading buffalo.
We can call it that, sir. He wasn't going to put it on. It was an illegal adoption, if you will, right?
Right. But yeah, he was actually illegally trading buffalo to be able to get this girl. So
seems legit, right? That's normal
right.
for district attorneys of counties to do these kind of matters, right? Here in America,
Yeah,
right?
of course, happens all the time.
Right.
So what ended up happening is the sheriff of Utah County came out one day several years ago and just told the public, it was a press conference, told the public that they were looking into matters of ritualistic abuse. That was it, not satanic or anything, just ritualistic
Well,
abuse.
well, let's be
And
honest. There's some
they
negative
had
connotations with the term Satanism, sir. We can't be going around
there
throwing
is,
that around here, having press conferences saying Satanism.
right. So they came out and said, we're looking into, some older matters of ritualistic abuse. If there's any tips or anything, feel free to call this number, blah, blah, blah. The very next day is when David Levitt comes in, has his own press conference, calls in all the news channels, Fox 13, KUTV2, KSL5, all of them.
Yeah, I loved it. It
And
was great. I loved
yeah,
it.
and this is where he comes out and says, yeah, we are definitely not guilty. This is a witch hunt, classic excuses. And
no one told you that memory loss.
it's
Go
just
ahead,
an absolute nightmare where
but my memory
he
feels
keeps
as sharp.
talking about how him and his wife are not guilty for
This one.
sexual
And
assaulting children
as I
or eating children.
There you
And
go.
none of this was
You're like,
brought
wait a
up.
second, dude. Cannibalism. What's going on here, bud?
Right, right. None of it was brought up. He called the accuser in his case mentally ill like 16 times or something. It was some ungodly number. And it's just the strangest thing you've ever seen. And yeah, his name was not dropped. Nobody's name was dropped at all. And that's what makes all of this so strange.
And you mentioned the Idaho 4 case before, and we're talking about the nation of Deseret there in northern Utah or western Idaho. It's same Mormon countries, if you will. And again, everyone in that Idaho case, all the major players, well, a lot of the major players, they and their families, including one of the quote unquote surviving victims, that liar that they call a surviving victim, Dylan Mortensen, her Mortensen bloodline, her father, and going back, through his paternal line, and Scott Green, the University of Idaho president, and one of my favorite characters, the Gooch, Indiana, Ohio. Good Lord of mercy, I don't even know what state we're talking about, sir. Idaho State Police Detective Victoria Gooch, whom no one really talks about, who's the most integral party in the entire case in framing Brian Kohberger. She's the one who came up with the bushy eyebrows, the frozen shock face, etc. She's the one who worked the IGG investigation for the DNA. And we didn't know about this for over 2 years because these were matters of national security and sealed. Her husband, Gooch, the Mortensens, and the Greens all came over together on the same pioneer wagon train into the nation of Deseret back in the 1850s. And today we have these characters in this major parapolitical event. I don't think these things are that far separated, but not the least of which, Victoria Gooch, again, that's her married name. Her maiden name is something Greek I can't pronounce. But her father, we'll get to that in a minute, because when we get back to these matters of the process, a lot of things come up process there in that Idaho case too. But again, is it that far separated the same subject when we're dealing with all these Mormons, the nation of Deseret, and again, all these process connections? I don't think they're that far separated, but it is weird that we see these matters like that with this. Again, I think it's, to a certain extent, I think these old Mormon families that sell that area in the nation of Deseret, they don't like America. You know what I mean? Right. They're going to sell buffaloes, kidnap children, et cetera, et cetera. And regarding more connections with Levitt and that Ukrainian operation he was running, he was money laundering through FTX. And FTX is deeply ingrained within that Idaho situation.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting. So I believe it's called the David Levitt Foundation, or maybe just the Levitt Foundation, I believe, set up by his family. His family is all highly connected all the way through, of course. But it's really interesting what the foundation does is they go into war-torn countries or countries that have just had like a regime change or anything. And the whole purpose of what they do is they come in to set up a new legal system. Mm-hmm, and that's all they do. And
yeah, they're very involved with children too, right?
Right. And, obviously they're going to rig a lot of the laws towards being able to traffic, or to be able to transfer children back and forth. A lot of the things they're trying to get done in California right now. But basically after the 2014 revolution or regime change, in Ukraine, basically the Levitt Foundation came in to help them set up their new legal foundation, which
Well, yeah, they
their
gotta help
new
the kids.
legal system. So
You mean to tell me,
and
sir, they're not being honest? They're not really helping the kids when they go over there?
no. And this is actually the laws that Zelensky is using. The wartime laws were actually set up by this foundation as well. So that's how he's been able to stay president, during wartime, which also he doesn't want the war to end, because then they're going to have an actual election and he'll definitely lose. So it's
yeah, dude. I mean, these things are all, again, they don't, these matters, they seem disparate on their face, but they're all very connected, like largely through financial aspects. But again, these Mormon families like the Levitts, because if I'm not mistaken, they hail from Parley P. Pratt, and therefore they're second or third cousins with old Mittens Romney, and amongst other characters.
Correct.
So,
and a lot of these families actually, they're not that far removed. Obviously, because of polygamy being a thing back in the day. Although polygamy, it's really interesting, because polygamy was actually only available to the wealthy back then. It wasn't like all Mormon men were polygamist. It's a common misconception.
I appreciate, as a fellow Exmo and a fan of facts, I appreciate you pointing that out. I do the same, because it wasn't until Joseph Smith's number 2 guy, the general in charge of the Nauvoo Legion, which was the second largest army in America behind the U.S. Army at that time, in the 1840s. And they
he froze.
Am I back?
Yep,
if it wasn't for the Nauvoo Legion and the matters of financial matters supporting the Union, that is, we would not have won the Civil War. The Union. When I say we,
right.
I have there's a whole. I've never understood the South will rise again. I know a lot of South will rise againers in the South, and I oftentimes get accused of being a Southerner, but West Virginia did in fact cede for these matters of being part of the Union. And my other parts are definitely deeply part of the Union up there in the Republic of Vermont, but my other roots are. But nonetheless, these things are very relevant in regards to ongoing things within disputes and secret societies today, is what I argue regarding all of these conflicts and whatnot. And the Mormons are deeply ingrained in that. And if it wasn't for the Mormon Legion, the Nauvoo Legion, and the financial aspects, again, the Civil War would have gone a different way. The settlement of the West would have gone a different way, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct. Well, and obviously they like to use these organizations, right? Because it's easy to hide in plain sight, because they can take these organizations and, whether they start the organizations, whether they infiltrate, doesn't really matter. I mean, unless you're looking into the deep dive, but the results are always the same. They end up in positions of power. They pervert whatever group that they get involved with, and then they're able to do whatever they need to do under the guise of being this or that.
No, that's a good point. And again, I think that's one, I think you're making some great points there. And I think the one thing to consider is it's not always as black and white, like I was saying about the ongoing warfare to take control of some of these organizations, like, that whole American Pope situation.
Right.
But we also see that within, I think, the Society of Cincinnati, there's as I demonstrate here through numerous examples on Operation GCD, the secret society that started America, the modern day Knights Templar and bloodlines therein, where they pass it down hereditarily into our, current times. These folks have very demonstrably had a warring factions in their organization since day one. Right. And I kind of break it down to liberty and anti-liberty movement. And relative to the Mormon folk, Joseph Smith, in all probable likelihoods, was a hereditary member of the Society of Cincinnati. He starts the Mormon religion on a mound in Fayette, New York, named after the French General Lafayette of the French chapter. And he did so using the theology and philosophies of the Society of Cincinnati.
Right. Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, that's actually one organization I have failed to look into yet, is I just haven't had a chance to be able to do so yet, but I keep hearing you talk about them.
You've come to the right place, sir.
Yeah, and they seem, just like many, seem to be all over the place.
Let's play a game then. My general thesis on the organization and conspiracy culture relative to it is that all things in conspiracy culture, all roads lead back to the society. So let's play a game. You name the conspiracy culture, parapolitical event, assassinations, etc., whatever, from day one there in 1776 to present, and I'll give you a connection to the Society of Cincinnati.
Malcolm X, assassination of Malcolm X.
Ooh, that's a good one. So if we're going to put it in the same program as Double Sirhan, right? James Earl Ray, right? The mind controlled assassin program of that era took out all those leaders in 68, right? Well, we're going to be talking a lot of process stuff, connected to those matters, and these matters of hypnosis and mind control. And again, I introduce every Fridays with my old almost PR rep. When I say almost, I was never going to hire the man. He did stop for about a year, and the whole matter was just very strange. And folks can check that out on the case of Buffalo Jared Revisa on Operation GCD Sundays, and where I do the free Patreon previews here on the streams, and that over to Patreon for the rest of which. But he's literally a transpocalypse mind control assassin. And dude, my gut told me that from moment one that he wanted to stab me a bunch and wear my skin as a human coat. And the guy that he did stab and murder later hired him as his PR rep. So I don't think I was far off from the assessment, my ocular pat down. But why he ever wanted to be my PR rep, I have no idea. And it was just not. He's like, no, sir, I will not take no for an answer. I'm like, Lord of mercy, there's something wrong with this boy. But he's from the family that won the World Series for the Chicago Cubs. 2016, they broke the curse of the GOAT, the 94-year curse that prevented the Cubs from winning the World Series. The Cubs thank Ken Revisa in the Revisa sports hypnosis business, which Buffalo Jared worked for at the time. And speaking about JJ and folks, that motherfucker changed his name to Jared Jones. He's definitely trying to out JJ me, and I'll have none of that.
Oh, that's funny. So one thing I've been curious is, where did you cross paths with this man? I'll get to that in a second, sir. I'll get to that. Let me close out the matter on the Society of Cincinnati and matters of these assassinations and mind control assassins of 68 and the late 60s. So they all seem part and parcel of the same program. So there's not a direct connection with Malcolm X, for example, in his assassination outside of fomenting chaos and discord, if you will, in society. Which was a part and parcel of that whole program. But we see the matters connected to that same assassination program deeply ingrained within the process, be it Double Sirhan, being a member over there, cited as being in attendance at Tate Polanski, sex magic ritual parties hosted by the process of the Tate Polanski home, and law enforcement reports. And when followed up with Ed Sanders, the author of The Family, and his private investigator, Larry Larson, follows up with the FBI on those matters back in the early 70s after the Manson trial. The FBI would tell Larry Larson that Sharon Tate had to die because she overheard something in regards to Double Sirhan in matters of national security. So that's one way to look at that whole situation. Again, part of that same Malcolm X assassination program there around with Martin Luther King and RFK all around the same time there. We also see James Earl Ray going off with Timothy Leary, connected all those yahoos. But we see the one way to look at that Tate Polanski murder. Well, here's another way to look at it in that same program of operations, right? Is that Sharon Tate's father, the U.S. Army Military Intelligence Colonel Paul Tate, his second great grandfather was Lieutenant Jesse Tate of the Virginia chapter of the Society of Cincinnati. And that 8.5-month-old boy that was unborn boy in the pregnant belly of Sharon Tate, that would have been the hereditary descendant for Paul Tate. And to date, he has no hereditary descendant, and that bloodline has ended. Interesting. So where did the society, did they come from Europe and set up shop here, or were they started here?
It's a good question, sir. It's a very good question. So on May 13th, Friday, May 13th, 1783, George Washington, General von Steuben, Henry Knox, and one of the generals there, they all met at von Steuben's cabin just south of Newburgh, New York, and Fishkill, New York, on a mound on the Hudson River, and started the Society of Cincinnati. Now, the Treaty of Paris would be signed, I believe it was September 6th, circa. We'll call it circa, don't quote me on that. 1783. So therefore, the Society of Cincinnati, the men who fought the war to start this country, who include some of those men who signed those documents to do so, not all of them though. So not all the founding fathers are members of the society, but
Right.
many of them are, right, but not all of them, and even some of the ones that didn't serve. So to qualify in that initial membership, you had to be an officer underneath the command of George Washington in the wars of 1776 there, and they appointed some of those founding fathers as honorary members, such as Ben Franklin. Now, other founding fathers would be honorary members by virtue of becoming a U.S. president. So everyone from, well, not George was already an original member. John Adams, so he was not an original member, but he was an honorary member, the second president, by virtue of being U.S. president. Now, that would be a trend continued all the way through George H.W. Bush. For some reason, and no one will give me a legitimate answer to my satisfaction, but I've received numerous communications from society members over the years when I talk about these matters online and on these interwebs conversations here since May of 2016. I actually started Operation GCD to talk about the Society of Cincinnati and the mounds in which they coveted and venerated very much. So we see the trend going on with the honorary members, but it's those hereditary members, and they pass down their heritage and paternal membership like a modern day knighthood to our current era. And these are the men that wage and wield power in this country and the families they're in. So it's not always the card carrying members. Oftentimes it is, but it's not. It's like the old world where we have these other branches of those trees within these quote unquote almost royal lines, if you will, in the new world here that have carried over. Where these cadet branches, as they call them, they war against each other and fight, and that is what we see over there in the old world, and it carries on here, if you ask me. But very powerful organization ever since day one, and again, they started before America. They're the ones who created America, and they still run America.
So my question from there is, what is David Crosby's connection? Because he's got
David Van Cortlandt Van Schuler Crosby, huh?
Yes, sir.
Well, so he hails from two of the founding Dutch families of New Amsterdam, the Van Schulers and the Van Cortlandts. They are both society families. I'm drawing a blank on his family tree. I'll look up in a minute. I do think he he's on my list as a possible candidate of a hereditary member of the Society of Cincinnati. Because so here's the deal. So it doesn't always go through the father, right? It goes through the paternal bloodlines, but if there's not a son, let's say Paul Tate, he didn't have any sons. He had 3 daughters. 2 of them died, Sharon and his sister. The one surviving sister has a daughter. She's, I don't know how old are you, sir? She's roughly my age. She's in her 40s, probably.
They're 33 is how old
there
I
you
am.
go. So somewhere between your age and my age would be Paul Tate's granddaughter. I think she has but she has a daughter. So she's still of age to maybe have a son in the future. But if not, then Paul Tate, I don't know what goes on with that bloodline within the society.
Right.
Because, there's no obvious connections. But we see other instances where it gets passed down through the mothers, right? Because there are no sons like that. So again, if his daughter's daughter would have a son, you'd see 2 passing down through 2 women to the son, and these things happen. So Jackie Bouvier Kennedy Onassis, right? JFK's wife.
Right.
Her father, Black Jack Bouvier, was a hereditary member of the Maryland chapter of the Society of Cincinnati from his great-grandfather. Maternal great-grandfather. So his maternal great-grandfather had a daughter, and then him, right?
So typically it's sent down through the paternal side.
That's the goal. Straight paternal line, usually the eldest, but sometimes they pick not the eldest. But here's another example. Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, was a hereditary member of the Society of Cincinnati because his maternal grandfather did not have any sons. His mother was an American. Here's another example. How these things get a little funky at times and trying to track. So it's not always easy to track. Sometimes these folks brag about it. Other times, I can deduce it by no other sons, no other paternal heritage, by who would be the member. And oftentimes when I do that, I look and see, oh, well, that makes sense. They're a very notable person in society or history. So these things are, they usually go hand in hand, and typically, most specifically through the general ranks. So in America, there's only ever been one father and one son who both have held 4-star general ranks. You'd think it'd be General Patton and his son. No, his son was only a 2-star general. You'd think it'd be other notable folks. No, it's John McCain #1 and John McCain #2, who were the father and grandfather of U.S. Senator John McCain.
Right.
Yep.
Right. That makes
And
a
John
lot of
McCain,
sense.
number 4, his son is most likely the hereditary member, right? Let's see,
Right.
usually name, game, eldest son, that kind of deal, right?
Right. Interesting.
Now,
Huh.
here's another parapolitical event. Back to those murders there of an occult nature in 68 and 69. We were talking about Manson stuff.
Right.
Would you believe the Zodiac murders? Brian Hartnell, the fellow that survives the Lake Berryessa attack on September 28th, 1969, his mother was a Walker, of descendant from Colonel Walker. Remember that General von Steuben I was just mentioning,
Right.
who hosted the party to start the society. He was the aide de camp to George Washington when he first came over here from Europe. And when he his aide de camp, his military sidekick there, was this Colonel Walker, Colonel Benjamin Walker. Colonel Benjamin Walker's third great grandson was, third great grandson was Brian Hartnell through his mother, who was a Walker. Disregard fourth. His mother was the third great granddaughter of Colonel Walker. Her father, the second great grandson of Colonel Walker. So he didn't have a second great grandson. Brian Hartnell's grandfather did not have any sons. His mother, she had a daughter, Brian Hartnell's mother, who had one son, Brian Hartnell. So therefore, it seems easy to deduce in those circumstances the very likely candidate and hereditary member would have been Brian Hartnell, who inherited that position approximately 2 years prior to his stabbing there at Lake Berryessa. So like the Tate situation, was that situation also a hit to end that bloodline of the Walkers?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously, it says here the Society of the Cincinnati was founded to perpetuate, quote, the remembrance of the vast event of the achievement of American independence.
Right.
Although that might be why it started. Like, what's the whole point of it now? Like, because obviously I'm sure their goals have probably changed over the years.
Well, I would argue that's their, they got to have, like anyone's got to have their own little, corporate motto, right?
Right.
So, as I was saying,
gotta have a cover
men,
story.
yeah, you got to make it look right. You know what I mean? So, because these are ongoing war feuds, bloodline feuds going back for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So we look at the men who started the society, like George Washington and the other officers in his group who have now passed down the heritage. Like I said, I call them the modern day Knights Templar because they were the descendants of the Knights Templar, and they were doing the same activities the Templar was doing, trying to restore their liberty, their property rights, and their freedoms. So, are you familiar with the Magna Carta?
Yes.
It's kind of a was not being serious, obviously. I'm figuring you probably weren't.
Right.
So in the year 1215, the Knights Templar returned from the Crusades, and when they return in roughly 1214, and they find out that King John of Lackland had given all of their land and rights and liberties back to the Vatican, their independent free status and sovereignty.
Right.
And King John did that in 1213 after he kidnapped a knight of Clan Vance and signed this order giving all their land back, this edict, signed it in a Knights Templar rectory there in France, and gave it back to the Pope. And again, he wasn't even really the king. He was the fake king because, again, it's these bloodline cadet lines, right, and feuds that go on.
Right.
Because King John did not get king. He was not the king. He was not a Knights Templar. His older brother, King Richard, was. And when King Richard was on the Crusades, that's when all this happened. And we see this tale being told in our present day through the film Robin Hood.
Right.
Robin Hood was a Templar knight. He comes back, and King John had given all his property away, right, and lost all their sovereignty and liberty and properties. Well, that happened in 1213. In 1215, we get the Magna Carta.
Right.
That's the Knights Templar holding King John hostage and getting all that land back, even though modern day historians, there we go, I call it the crown history we live under, like not crayon, but like English crown and Vatican crown, where we live under these fables and fairy tales of their natures. So we call those Knights Templar the robber barons. That's what the historians call them. They were 25 Knights Templar who, again, wanted their shit back, man. And a lot of them were cousins to King John and King Richard. And 10 of those 25 knights are the forefather of George Washington. They're his 14th through 17th great grandfathers. So we see an instance, including Robert de Ross, that's his 15th great grandfather of George. So we see an instance in 1215 where Robert de Ross is forcing and getting all establishing rights, liberties, and the pursuit of happiness or prosperity, whatever you want to look at it.
Right.
And modern day historians even call the U.S. Constitution the Magna Carta 2.0. So 1215, we got Robert de Ross, and then 9 of others buddies, and their grandson George Washington, out of those 10 knights, does the same thing 560 plus years later, establishing the same document, rights, and freedom against the same parties, the crown.
Right.
So we're dealing with some circumstances of much longer, feuds, right?
So that actually leads me. Let me ask you this. This is something I've been tossing around in my head for a minute, just looking at history and everything. It seems to me, and let me know what you think, that one, the Templars didn't end. They weren't actually killed. And maybe they were actually killed, but the Templar organization is still ongoing. But also,
absolutely,
the Crusades never stopped. We're still living through the Crusades.
You are spot on, sir. We see that that is a meta narrative I've been talking about here since May of 2016. Back then, especially when I first started here at Operation GCD. And again, I thank you all folks of the interwebs for joining us here tonight to get a little GCD. And I thank you, sir, for joining me here as well. I do like where your brain hole's at. You're right on target. So back then we had, I think, 7 out of the top 10 populated cities in the United Kingdom were run by a Muslim mayor, when the population of the United Kingdom was less than 2% Muslim at the time, or 3% Muslim.
Right.
So we what we're seeing is the modern day Crusades. We're seeing that invasion, right, of the Muslim empires into the Western world, as we've seen before.
Right.
And we see it on the flip side too. We see Donald Trump moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and he immediately starts digging tunnels underneath that area. That sounds like a Templar thing to do.
Right. Well, and they're also talking about building the third temple. They just sacrificed the red heifer. There's all sorts of things that just align with what has already happened. It just, I don't believe that history repeats itself, but I do believe history rhymes. And it just seems like a lot of these things are still ongoing. Kind of like World War I and World War II were really meant to destroy the old world, to usher in the new world, destroy a lot of those technologies, a lot of the architecture and everything. They had to destroy all of that to be able to usher in.
You also can't institute your worldwide policy of Nazis, right, without a war in which I apologize. Go ahead.
No, you're good. It's just that we had to destroy all the architecture. We had to destroy all the old world technology to usher in this new world order, basically.
Oh, my back. I keep freezing up over here. Go ahead.
You're good.
My back.
Yeah.
No, you're right on, dude. That's spot on, dude. So we see that though. You can't, for example, institute the Fourth Reich without having a war. The war was the plan was never about the Third Reich in the situation. That was the onset in which to deploy their operation worldwide, and we see that now.
Right, which also makes sense of why a lot of this stuff is coming from Switzerland, because a lot of those Nazis actually ended up in Switzerland. So,
do you know why they end up in Switzerland, sir?
No.
We have another JJ to thank, John J. McCloy, and that motherfucker's not going to out JJ me, that's for sure. He was put in charge of over there. The guy who helped with the Warren Commission. The World Bank president. He was put in charge over there and working with the Dulles boys to help funnel in all these Nazis into America, but not just into America. I have no doubt those fellas were cued into the plan, the Nazi plan, because what we see that transpired with all this Project Paperclip Nazi nonsense went on over there in Russia as well. And these Nazis communicated with each other throughout the Cold War. They're the ones who, my opinion, based upon all the available facts and evidence, these are the folks that instituted the Cold War, was the Nazis.
Right.
Fueling each other from both sides while working together. And we know they were communicating.
Right. Well, and I would actually agree with you on that, because after the fall of the Third Reich, we've got the rat lines running all over the world at that point. And check this out, Michael Aquino's first wife was LDS. She was Mormon.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And yes, sir. You were a man with a lot of facts and details. I respect that. I was just talking about that last night, how much these things go intertwined with each other, because they not only was his first wife LDS, Michael Aquino and his mother were living with that family when Michael and her were young.
Right. And her family was directly involved with a lot of these rat lines.
The
supposedly, Forbes. Right, exactly. Which is a famous last name here in this country, in case nobody knows. But they supposedly, their official story was that they were one of the last families on the train out of Berlin before Berlin fell. And it's like, well, no, you guys were actually here before then, but you guys were sent over here to basically set up a rat line, which they did through the LDS church. And that's why Utah actually has a pretty high German population over here. So, surprise.
No, dude, these are all very salient characteristics to understanding what we're dealing with today here in America, because it is very Nazi shit. It's all Nazi shit. Again, that National Security Act of 1947 is all Nazi shit. It created NASA, the CIA, and the Air Force. And I assure you, all three of those organizations still today are the same. They get financed through that same piece of legislation. I don't care what the appropriations do later. That's their initial appropriation. Therefore, on paper, they are the same.
Right. 100%. And, I do kind of poke fun at some other researchers, some of the more old school researchers, like the one that always comes to mind is Douglas Valentine, who, wrote books about the Phoenix program and stuff like that, or even Dave McGowan and stuff. Some of these other guys, they focus so hard on the fascist, and obviously there are these fascists out there, but I think that
I like where you're going, sir. I like where you're going
a little bit. It's to me, it's just statism. I don't see a difference between like a fascist or a socialist or whatever. It's just different flavors.
Dude, you're reading my brain hole, sir. You're reading my brain hole. I say that all of the time. There is no difference. Fascism, communism, Nazism, socialism, they all equal nihilism. These people have no belief systems, and the only belief system they believe in is authoritative control.
Right. Which is why they're always the party of big government, which is what I don't understand, why these guys don't just love Trump. Like, come on. Trump is expanding the state like beyond what he did back in his first term. He's expanding it beyond what Biden did, or whoever the hell was running the auto ban under Biden. It's just like any president.
You're making some good points, though. No, dude, I haven't really considered that. You're making some good points there, because you think they would love his actions more, right?
Right. And I think there are some that do. But as we saw in this like most recent trans shooting, person didn't love Trump, but supposedly
Transpocalypse Now.
Right. That's good. You see a lot of these people like they're anti-Trump, and it's like, but your other ideologies like mesh up with, statism. So I don't get it. Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think that's why I like what you're saying, sir, is because I think it speaks to the propaganda campaigns around these matters, right?
Right.
These folks aren't looking at the characteristics, the salient characteristics or understandings of what's going on with that person, Trump or anyone else. They're just going with the narrative and being weaponized and radicalized as a result.
Or counter narrative, which we know is controlled by the same organizations, because you've got to control
that's for damn sure.
Narrative and counter narrative.
And what you're saying to me is hilarious. So I don't really, I don't read a lot. I mean, I probably should highlight some of the comments I get and reviews on the podcast here in Operation GCD. I do appreciate all feedback and commentary, including our channel, the CIA AI Bill Colby ball washer that I often find in the chat. His dedication keeps me motivated. But this one was funny, because this is also why I say, I'm not the vice president, because this person I think thinks I'm the vice president. There's a lot of MAGA talk going on here. And I don't know that I've ever really espoused anything MAGA specific other than I love America and the Constitution. And if that makes you MAGA in this day and age, this speaks to that propaganda I'm talking about, where you can't even like America anymore without being MAGA.
Right. Yeah. And I find that interesting as well. I was thinking about this just the other day. I was thinking about what it was like before Trump just recently won, and because they control the narrative and counter narrative, right? Like the message around Trump, like it really did seem like he was on a path to come in and drain the swamp. I didn't think that he was going to. I mean, he was a president, but nonetheless, like the messaging around him was so good. It was so good. I had never heard a president or a candidate for president, especially one at that level, turn around and say something like, we're going to audit the Fed, we're going to abolish the Fed, we're going to abolish income tax. Like,
that's what I'm saying, dude. These things are never really black and white, right? Oh,
right?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, it was just some like Ron Paul level stuff, coming out of Trump. And, the way that they treated him all the way through his first his first term, and then in between with Biden and everything, it kind of seemed like he was coming in for revenge. So why wouldn't he do something like that? It was plausible at that point. And it's just,
I think some of that still is plausible. I think some of that still is plausible. So what I think you're describing here again is not, things are not as black and white as folks like to make them out to be. And there's a very gray area.
Amen to that.
We see someone like Trump who could be the grayest of all areas, right? He's got a lot of good, got a lot of bad, but here's the thing he does have, we can say objectively speaking, he's a man with a mission. And one of those missions, it seems, is he hates the Federal Reserve because they cut him off financially in 1994, forcing him into bankruptcy.
Right.
So there's not a corporation or company on this planet that doesn't operate on credit. And when all the banks under the Federal Reserve get together and cut off all of your credit, well, then that's a conspiracy of sorts. Don't say that word out loud. Folks don't like the sound of that, right? Conspiracy. But we see that's why he went over to the Deutsche Bank lands, because no one here in America. So he has hated the Federal Reserve. And I do think, and studying Donald Trump's actions and activities, and trying to understand, how he operates. Yeah, I do think he legitimately has a beef with the Federal Reserve that he intends to follow through with.
Right. And hey, dude, I'm open for it, because at this point, like, I don't care where dude, I'll take any liberty, any legitimate liberty. I'll take it. And I don't care what side or what person it comes from.
I like your style, sir. That's exactly what I say, because we can sort out the details later as long as we can start establishing some American principles back here again.
Right. And, the intelligence or unintelligence community
unintelligence. There you go, sir.
They have definitely been in control for far too long. And, whether this full term of Trump goes well or just complete on fire, because it's been on fucking fire lately. Not fires and good, but fires and bad. But regardless of how it turns out, the one thing that he has done that I will forever thank him for is destroying the public's trust in the media.
Dude, that's what thank you, sir. Thank you. So that's what I'm saying. Like, folks like to talk shit about a lot of these things. I'm saying there's value in a lot of these matters.
Mm-hmm.
Folks don't believe in the media anymore. He can destroy every fucking facet of these bullshit government operations we have, for all I care, like the Department of Education. Burn that shit down. He's all about that. I'm happy for it.
Right. And just the media thing is good enough for me, because it's like, man, he destroyed Operation Mockingbird, because let's be honest, that shit's still running. There's no way you're going to get rid of your assets that are able to influence the country. Are you kidding me? And
not only is it still running, it's grown into the media space on the interwebs, right?
Right. I mean, it's taken over the alt media. There's a lot of these people, the Charlie Kirks, the Tim Pools or whatever. These people,
the Joe Rogans, the diet Joe Rogans, the vegan Joe Rogans.
Yeah, exactly. The carnivore Joe Rogans, the skinny Joe Rogans, the fat Joe Rogans. All of them.
You got Lex Friedman. I call him vegan Joe Rogan. Then you got that one Danny Jones guy. He's kind of diet Joe Rogan.
Yeah, Joe Rogan 2.0 for sure. Yeah. Which is funny. I actually saw Danny Jones on I saw a clip of his show where he was talking about joining the CIA, which I was like, man, you're just like not hiding it, are you?
Typical. No, but these things obviously continue. And again, there is a matter of destroying the trust. And I think one thing that I salute Trump for doing as well, and I'm not the vice president, I don't work for him there, he has forced the Democratic National Committee, not only and the media, not only to talk about the Epstein situation. Wherever the dust settles with Trump and Epstein, he has forced them to talk about it. He has forced Democratic Committee and DNC congressional folks to literally draft legislation to force him to release things. These things are so far off the reservation from where matters were just even 6 months ago, let alone 5 years ago, that we live in some interesting times. But if I may, sir, comment on this real quick before we press forward. I do want to, on these matters you're discussing, and these, again, I like where your brain hole's at, sir. All of these things are anti-liberty. That's what I ultimately call it. The fascisms, the communisms, the Nazism, etc., the Marxisms. All of these folks share some, common ideologies and principles, like the diet and vegan Joe Rogans. There's a lot of similarities between all those ideologies. You can argue some slight differences, but ultimately speaking, the result is the same: nihilism and authoritative control.
Yeah,
so
100%.
I really enjoyed this review right here from this folk of the interwebs, if I may read this. JJ is a virulent and confident anti-communist. I'm not sure if that's exactly accurate. I mean, I'm pro-liberty, I guess, and anti-liberty or communism would fall in an anti-liberty faction. So, I agree with their assessment in that regard. Without having any knowledge on the subject. Well, that's strange, and this is why. His pet subjects are having almost been eaten by a serial killer. Well, they've listened to half the show. I didn't almost get eaten by the serial killer. I came face to face with the serial killer. He may have fed me human meat burger the year prior.
Right.
And I almost got stabbed by a different serial killer a bunch, and then he wanted to wear my skin as a human coat. So they've listened to half the show. I'll give them credit for that. And the like, so I don't expect him to have scholarly or rigorous historical knowledge. Well, that's a shocker. But to call the process here, this is my favorite part, because you, sir, if I'm not mistaken, are a former adherent to the Church of Satan?
Yes. Yeah. I'm actually a former Satanist. Yeah.
I thought I heard you say that on your podcast. Not only you're an ex-Mormonism and former Satanist, which again, I think we'll get into here in a moment. I think there's probably a lot of similarities in some of that theology, as I'm sure you'll agree. But this person says, but to call the process Scientology, Satanism, etc., communism and Marxism just demonstrates the weakness in many blind spots. Oh, look, I'm blind of the thinking. So let me just comment on that here before I go any further. The only reason I call these folks communists, Marxists, or Nazis like Michael Aquino is because they claim that themselves, right?
Right.
So either this person is bullshitting themselves along with everybody else by leaving this review, or they're very lost, because the process specifically will tell you right out of Karl Marx, we want to destroy the bourgeois middle class. Right. That's literally out of Karl Marx. So, these things, much like our channel, I do find comedy in these kind of remarks, but I do, it speaks to this misunderstanding of this political stuff we're talking about. I think that was a very excellent point and brings me to my next point. There's a lot of similarities between the theologies and philosophies amongst the Church of Satan and the kind of Gnostic belief system of the Mormons. Am I correct? Is that an accurate statement, or am I getting a one-star review on that from you too, sir?
So I don't know if I would say that there's a lot, but there definitely are some. Well, one of them, I think the strongest correlation between the two is being your own master, not, for anyone who doesn't know, in the LDS faith, there are 3 different afterlives basically that you can end up in, or 3.
It's not really a hell, is there? It's like 3 heavens.
Well,
it's like lower forms of heaven.
Right. So the idea of hell in the Mormon religion is the absence of God. Okay. So, and the lowest,
which is weird because they teach man is a god, right?
Yeah, sort of. Or God was a man.
Right. And you get your own planet.
Right. And so in the upper beliefs, you can actually get your own planet, right? Now that's actually
tier 1. We're gonna get you on the tier 1 heaven program, sir. Your tier 1 heaven program, you get your own planet. Tier 2, you're in the waiting list to get your planet. Tier 3, you're not getting the planet anytime soon in any afterlives.
Right. Now, some of this stuff does go back to the forming. Some of it's new, or newer. So, my opinion of Mormonism is pretty complicated, but that's a discussion for another day. But I think that is the closest and most most aligned that the two belief systems are, that you can be or are your own master or your own God. Because
Yep.
that's really the core of Satanism itself, is that every individual is actually a slave under God, and that God is preventing us from becoming our own gods.
Very
And
Gnostic,
so
right? Very much a prison
very,
planet kind of belief system, right?
very, very, which is also, related to Scientology, all of these different things.
Corporate Satanism. Corporate Satanism, if you
Right,
will. That's what I think.
right,
That's what I frame it
exactly.
as.
And so I think that's the biggest correlation, because on one hand, the newer Mormon faith, and I say newer like within since the 70s or so. So the newer faith within the LDS church is you follow the church leaders. And in fact, there's a doctrine in the Doctrine and Covenants, which was added, I believe, in the 80s or maybe even late 80s, maybe early 90s, to where you follow church leaders, even if they're wrong, because God will understand that you were just trying to do what was right.
And that was
That
kind of
is
derivative of
something,
the whole incident with all those bombings in Salt Lake City, right? With the whole
right,
salamander letter, right? This was they
right,
kind of came up with some new rules, if you will.
right. And actually, there's a lot of Mormons that do not agree with that. Also, there are a lot of Mormons that do. So it's kind of split. There's
There's a lot
actually
of
a lot
Mormon,
of
yeah. There's
splinter
a lot of.
groups.
Oh, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Well, just that there's a lot of splinter groups within the LDS religion. It's actually, for being a
From,
more
from moment
simple
one.
belief. What?
Yes, yes, sir. From moment one, right? Not even just
Right,
upon the death. There was folks splintering off before the death, where we started before on
right,
polygamy with that Nauvoo Legion general. When he got found out for being a polygamist, banging everybody's wives and daughters,
right,
Joseph Smith threw him out of Nauvoo and threw him out of So obviously, and there was already a contingent of folks that had already been thrown out of Nauvoo. They started their own Mormonism with this new general dude as their leader, right?
right,
And then he tried to take shortly thereafter, maybe 8 months later, Joseph Smith's murdered. He got murdered in that
right.
Carthage, Illinois prison by some fellow Freemasons. But again, that's a Society of the Cincinnati tale, if you ask me. And again, he was friends with his attorney was Abraham Lincoln, and his law firm represented Joseph Smith in
Interesting.
numerous cases. Right? They knew each
Just got to
other.
say, fuck Lincoln right there. I hate that
Well, I
guy.
mean, I got a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts about Lincoln as well. But the one thing I can say is he seems to have kept America intact from what it was intended. Its purposes were, because we see the Confederate side. And again, that's also, there's a lot of societies, Cincinnati stuff and
Right,
family feuds there. For example, the Society of the Cincinnati fractured themselves before the Civil War. The South Carolina chapter splintered off. And then we see a year later in 1861, the war begins in Charleston, South Carolina. So those two things shouldn't be separated. All of the officers of both the Union and the Confederacy were all the sons and hereditary members and grandsons, hereditary members of the original members of the society. So
right.
that shouldn't be ignored. And then we see, the whole family feud aspect. For example, Robert E. Lee, for example, the head general of the Confederate Army, he was the grandson-in-law of George Washington.
Interesting. I
So
didn't know that.
yeah, so George Martha was married beforehand and to
Right.
Daniel Custis, and he would die in the Yorktown battles right next to George, fighting in the wars of 1776. His son would be the hereditary member, Daniel Parke Custis. He would have been the hereditary member, and then his son would have been in the hereditary member after that, George Washington Parke Custis. Because
Interesting.
yeah, so what? So when I get to that guy in a second, so after Daniel Parke Custis dies there in the war, and that George and Martha adopt George Washington Parke Custis. So
Right.
we see, that's an interesting aspect of the society, because he would have been a hereditary member, right? He's also raised by George and Martha. His daughter, George Washington Parke Custis, his daughter would marry Robert E. Lee, who was also a hereditary member of the society. So essentially, the adopted biological grandson of Martha, adopted as a son of George and Martha, his daughter would marry Robert E. Lee, and we see nothing but society stuff around there.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, that's wild. So yeah, kind of to.
But yeah, I agree. I agree. There's a lot more of the Abraham Lincoln and Civil War stuff we don't know. And when I understand what you're saying, there's a lot of negative things we said about Lincoln, and there's I think that's part of it. So when I say there's an ongoing feud here, like, you know, there's a lot of presidents we don't talk shit about, and have a lot worse things to say about than Lincoln. So that's what I'm saying. I think there's, you know, some aspects of that is generated.
Right. So I'm definitely a Lincoln hater. However, there is one good thing that I think that he did do. So at the time, there was actually two armies that were getting ready to invade the United States if the United States split up into two. That was the Spanish,
you are correct,
and the French.
Yes, sir.
Russia was actually coming in as well. So I mean, there was all sorts of things going on at the time. So, you know, being able to hold us together, you know, I think is probably for the best. However, I do think we could have done it without a lot of the shitty things that he did, you know, censoring newspapers and, you know, heading over to statesmen's houses and trying to confiscate their weapons. You know, I think we could have done what needed to be done without a lot of the shitty things that he did on behalf of, you know, some of his financiers. But I think ultimately,
I don't necessarily disagree, sir.
Right. I think in the end that, you know, like you said, keeping the country together, that is what needed to happen. Now, I just don't think that we needed him acting the way that he did to get there.
I agree with you, sir, that when we play Monday morning quarterback, there is certain elements we can certainly press on and say that's probably not a very American thing to do.
Right.
But that being said, we also have to recognize, you know, and I'm relating these things to my experiences in law enforcement for 20 years in military police, the Air Force, and combat therein for 5 years. And speaking of SWAT, we started this conversation with Daryl Gates. I know Daryl Gates' name very well when you mentioned that to me on your show, and we started talking about that, because he is a legend in the SWAT communities, and that's where I started my career in the Air Force. I was a teenage SWAT team leader. So, and his name again was very well known amongst. I mean, I went to Army SWAT school. I went to, you know, Air Force SWAT school. I went to civilian SWAT schools. I went to a lot of schools, and you know, you hear his name everywhere. And so that was some, again, blew up my brain hole even learning some of those aspects. But you know, the one thing I will say also in living through some circumstances in combat and SWAT and military police stuff is that you know, again, I'm not saying there's not something we shouldn't say about Lincoln and some of those un-American kind of activities, but you know, we also don't know what he was dealing with at the time. And I still think there's a lot not understood about the whole situation.
I would have to agree with that. I'm pretty sure there was a lot of do this or else you get killed kind of a thing, you know, much like a lot of presidents.
Well, not only that, again, we're talking about secret society, bloodline feuds dating back again to, you know, the anti-liberty movement wants to side with those crown and European interests, the French armies, the Spanish armies, right? Aaron Burr was his financiers, I think is how you say it, were all European interests of the crown. So, and we see that in his attempt to take over America and again, another matter concerning the society. He was a society member out of New York, and he murdered Alexander Hamilton, murked in 1804 there, right after the Louisiana Purchase, very important precipitating event. And he does that in his attempt to take over America. Now, modern day historians would say that the Burr conspiracy begins after he murks Alexander Hamilton. That's because they don't want to draw attention to the fact that Alexander Hamilton was the president general of the Society of Cincinnati at that time. So if you're going to take over America, you're going to start with murking the president general of the society, and that's what he did.
Right.
And he's financed by European interests. He starts Tammany Hall politics there in New York City. So this is all a contingent of that same anti-liberty faction, which brings us the end of the Civil War in many regards. So again, I don't agree with martial law, but what did occur at the end of it was the federal troops in the South during the Restoration period for a period of 12 years, right? So that ends in the Great Compromise of 1877, when Samuel Tilden, whose father was a financier of the Confederate Army, and he lived there in Untermeyer Park, you know, the Son of Sam mound site where they did all this ritual stuff there. He owned it before Untermeyer, but he was part of Tammany Hall politics up there. He won the presidency and gave it to, was it McKinley? and said, we'll give it to the Republicans, McKinley, if you remove the troops from the South. And that's what essentially ended the Civil War and the Restoration period there. But it's all revolved around the same party of politics. And in between those matters, the Tammany Hall faction and the Aaron Burr conspirators would be the focal, would start the power centers of the Confederate Army in politics. So, and also, again, Society Cincinnati stuff, Jefferson Davis, a man who helped start the Smithsonian to study the mounds in America, his father was a member of the Society of Cincinnati, an OG member out of, I believe, Georgia or South Carolina. And his wife was the daughter of Zachary Taylor, another member of the society, President Zachary Taylor, and she was named after General Henry Knox and the man who helped start the society. So we're dealing with a lot of society stuff that we're only beginning to understand, I think, a lot of these things. But
see, a lot of this makes sense as well, because so one thing that kind of bothers me, I'm not sure how you feel about it, but even within the parapolitical or conspiracy communities, you know, there's definitely misinformation or disinformation as well. I don't always think it's necessarily nefarious when it's done. However, one thing that has always bothered me is the assertion that, the founding fathers were Freemasons. And it's like, well, yeah, but no, because a lot of them, when they were Freemasons, when they practiced and attended lodge, they were over in England. By the time they got here, they weren't. So this Society of Cincinnati thing actually makes a lot of sense, because it's almost like they picked up where they left off with an entire new fraternal organization.
Yeah, well, for sure. So that's a good point. So the one thing I say is not all U.S. presidents were Freemasons, but all U.S. presidents were members of the Society of Cincinnati. And on top of that, we look at the matters like you're pointing out, the misconceptions around these early onset of American Freemasonry, for example. George Washington, Freemason, didn't like them, started his own version. He has 13 chapters of that version today, exist still as when it started. I think a few more chapters after, over the years, but one of them is in Salt Lake City at the mothership, near the mothership.
That does not surprise me.
Now, that's the George Washington Lodge system of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Now, when we're talking about the American Revolution, the French Revolution is the same revolutions. Again, misconceptions because many folks call the French Revolution Bastille Day. That was actually the end of the French Revolution. That was a different revolution that started afterwards. That's the day they murked King Louis and Marie Antoinette and started lopping off their heads and the heads of Society of Cincinnati generals. These matters would stop when Napoleon, member of the Society of Cincinnati, would put a stop to it.
She also, Marie Antoinette, never said the whole "let them eat cake" thing. So, that's a common
propaganda, right? So these matters of these revolutions. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Oh, just that she never said "let them eat cake." Is just kind of a interesting way for them to be able to spin this story to make it. To give that message of the oppressed and the oppressors, because that's always the propaganda message that they have to spin.
You are spot on, sir. And these matters of the American Revolution, French Revolution did not just include that. As I was saying, General von Steuben there, a Prussian fella. We got Polish folks. We have royal, quote unquote, the royal bloodlines of these folks fighting for liberty in all these European nations, the Swiss. The man who helped bring us that Louisiana Purchase, Albert Gallatin, the Swiss founding father. He's also the man that would do a lot of the mound surveys and mapping before Lewis and Clark and hand them his maps. So we see a lot of these things. Lewis and Clark were society guys, obviously.
Right. That tracks.
But we see, I mean, again, we know the name, I assure you, sir, especially if it's a French name, because, like I said, the French Revolution, as far as the society was concerned, again, ended in 1794 there. And they all came to America because they got banned from France until 1925.
Right.
So we see all French families being very prominent here, not the least of which those Prevosts, in which the American French Protestant Pope is part of that family.
Now was the Society of the Cincinnati, were they actually founded in 1783? Like, because that's the official story, but were they founded maybe a year early? Because that's the official story. So
I don't think that's just when they put it on paper. I don't think these families have ever stopped fighting for their liberty.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm just saying no one put that on paper for me, but I was raised very much to fight for liberty and to respect the rights in which America was built upon.
Right.
I became a George Washington super fan long before I realized that my forefather 4 times over, because my Appalachian family tree looks like a Appalachian family pole. It lacks the requisite branches in which to be called a tree. But Abner Vance, my forefather 4 times over, was very likely and also the actual U.S. vice president. I'm not the vice president.
Right.
His forefather as well. I think he's only a one-timer. Is Abner Vance, in all likely probabilities, the biological son of George and Martha Washington. And
interesting.
Yeah. So long before I realized that, I was a George Washington super fan. I'm just saying that obviously is, aided and abetted my super fandom.
Right.
And again, I think these people are misdescribed, man. We're sold Disney fairy tale narratives of all of these people.
Right. I mean,
George
why not, though?
And, and his damn cherry tree, Abe Lincoln didn't tell a lie, or et cetera, right? Before we go any further, sir. Well, I mean, we live in the Muppet world again. I agree with you, sir. Why not, right? Hold that thought, sir, before we go any further. So we'll take a quick intermission.
Does crack cocaine make you act any differently? No. Is it safer than alcohol? Probably. People think of crack as being dirty. It's the exact opposite.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
Well, the only difference between crack cocaine and cocaine is sodium bicarbonate and water and heat, literally. That's it.
And those things are pretty much free if you go to like a science store.
This is free. You can go to your neighborhood convenience store and just get. Anyway, I don't want to tell people how to make crack cocaine, but it literally is a mayonnaise jar of cocaine and baking soda.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
When you make crack, what you're doing is you're burning off all the impurities so that it combines with the sodium bicarbonate, which makes it smokable. That's all. All of these actors and, people in the past that talked about they had a problem with cocaine and freebasing. They were smoking crack.
So cocaine is a hell of a drug.
Anyway, my point about it, your point about it, which I think is true, is that there's a thing about crack.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
What are your thoughts on that, sir? Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug. I am not surprised that
for not wanting to give a course on how to make crack. For not wanting to give a course on how to make crack, he certainly stepped right into giving a course on how to make crack, did he not?
Right. Jeez, man, that's man. If you want to talk about how good crack is, just look at him in his life. That's
dude. We as the American public, speaking of propaganda, we as the American public, dude, he said he was going to run for president, and then he gave that interview, dude. And that's what I'm saying. We as the American public don't understand. Yeah, because these people are fucking morons, dude. Especially that. I mean, that one in particular. These people, the DC in general, the general idea that anyone that's there on merit should be thrown out the window immediately. These people are the most dumb and depraved individuals that folks can find in our society, and then they put them in there, and I've seen it.
Right.
That's a good example right there of what I'm that's not an outlier, dude. There's a well-hidden, well-oiled machine to hide these things of matters such as that. And for example, most folks in America don't realize, despite all of the propaganda, right, and all these media reports, that dude was on his Air Force aircraft with his father for over 400 business trips to foreign nations, even though his father didn't know anything, right? But these matters are I assure you, sir, these matters are documented. I know this for my own 2 eyes. For example, 10 years ago, I was the superintendent of security for Andrews Air Force Base, where all of those Air Force operations fly off. So every time they got on a plane I saw that shit. So or my troops didn't, either or, but nonetheless. And before that, I was involved in manpower and stuff at headquarters for military police. And all those aircraft, even when Hunter Biden's going to jerk off some CCP folks over there in Beijing, there are Air Force military police folks on every Air Force aircraft that goes overseas to guard the aircraft, not the people. So
right.
You start asking a lot of those questions, sir, you find yourself counting fucking aircraft out on Andrew's flight line. But nonetheless, there's a lot of criminality amongst this whole culture that folks don't understand. They are all that dumb. They are all that dumb to say, I don't want to give a course on how to make crack. And again, that dude's not in jail right now today. It speaks to their connections to the DuPont family, the French chapter of the Society of Cincinnati. And I would argue that particular wing is part of the anti-liberty movement, but E.I. DuPont would try to help King Louis and Marie Antoinette escape on that day in what folks call Bastille Day regions there in 1794. And he escaped to America. E.I. DuPont did. He was a young lieutenant in the French chapter then, but he's the progenitor to the DuPont family, who have one wing of that has supported is deeply supported the Biden operations. And that wing of the DuPonts have a lot of kid diddling situations going on.
Also a family that has poisoned the entire planet through.
You ain't kidding, sir.
Through, all of their chemical production, especially the production of Teflon, which I think it's PFOAs. I believe that you can literally find traces of PFOAs in literally every person on the planet at this point because of the things that they've created, particularly in the Midwest, over in Ohio, Illinois, these places where they have a lot of their main plants.
West Virginia.
Yep. Yes, sir. Yep. There's a wonderful documentary about that. I believe it's called Dark Waters. It's all about the poisoning of the planet by DuPont and similar other chemical companies. And man, it's something to make you real angry right there. Because, there's a little bit of me, I'm not a fan of hippies at all. Don't like hippies. I think
damn hippies.
I think hippies are mean people cosplaying as nice people, and metalheads are nice.
I think they're communists, sir. It's in their names and their activities.
Right?
I think they're communists.
I would have to agree with that. But the one thing, I actually do care about the environment, and I've probably hugged a tree or two in my day. But the thing is I watch these companies actually poison the planet, poison the water and stuff. And boy, dude, that gets me hot. That gets me super hot.
Dude, I can respect that, sir. I'm not a I would never consider myself a tree hugging lefty of any sorts, but I do respect the environment, and I was instructed to do so thanks to the Mormons and the Boy Scouts. At least in part, right? They helped instill that in me. As I'm sure you noticed in your Mormon times, the Boy Scouts were very prevalent in culture there amongst the teenage, the males there.
Yes, sir. And luckily I didn't have any weird experiences in the Boy Scouts like so many boys did.
I like to thank my Boy Scout leaders in my Mormon church for a non-diddling, environment.
Right. Yeah. Same with mine. I was, after learning kind of what some or a lot of what those boys went through, I guess we were kind of lucky, it was.
Boy, you ain't kidding. There's a lot of diddling there, wasn't there?
A lot. And some people are still coming out, even though, the class action's done and everything. Some people are still coming out, tens of thousands, which another thing this kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation with DARE. At the end of the day, I think they counted, it was 10.2 million students ended up going through the DARE program. And that's
I'm glad we circled back there. I'm glad we circled back there to DARE because we got one of Bill Colby's ball washers here. And I do think there's connections there between Daryl Gates and Bill Colby. But no, you are correct, RR. There was a time period from, you're right, 1792 to 1794. That was the time period in which the Marie Antoinette and King Louis were imprisoned, along with then French General Lafayette. But he wasn't the original president of the French chapter. The original president of the French chapter of the society was a different general. Make up a French name because they all sound like Fraggle Rock to me. So he got his head lopped off in 1792. There was a lot of heads lopping off, but that's
right.
I respect your dedication. There are as much ball washing you do with Bill Colby in the Phoenix program. You know, when you're right, you're right. Again, I will respect the facts when the facts are out there. But I did see a comment from RR there a moment ago about me not commenting about the Vietnam and their their tyrannical activities as well. Well, here's the deal, bud. RR, I'm an American. This is America. So I give a shit about what America does and the impact it has. And because here's the deal. When you go murk 32,000 women and children in Southeast Asia via the Phoenix program, and you terrorize them through psychological operations of weaponized folklore and religion, courtesy of old Muppet Mikey Aquino, well, that's going to have some repercussions. That's going to have some repercussions.
Yes, sir. And, the whole Vietnam thing, man, that was just a mess, because I do agree, the Vietnamese were definitely doing some terrible things to us, but considering we started the whole war over, drugs, over the control of the heroin in that region.
Well, that's certainly a big part of it. Same with the rubber. So we didn't take it that most of the rubber is being manufactured there. So again, we go back to that French chapter. So that's a French corporation. They have ties to the French chapter of the Society of Cincinnati. So again, there's a lot of things we don't, and again, I'm not saying everybody within these organizations is guilty of anything, but there are factions, and they do clearly have factions that and rules to not include the outsiders, if you will, I think as well. But we do all see all these Nazi things. So I think when we see the worldwide deployment of the Nazi regime of the Fourth Reich, the Viet fucking Nam War, sir, is just the next evolution in that, and how they're going to keep evolving their operations, right? And we see all these same characters, and we live in a Muppet world. And this guy's not actually a Muppet, though. Kermit Roosevelt Jr., he was one of those OSS guys, important Nazis in this country. He was the son of Teddy Roosevelt. That ain't the only thing he was. Speaking of all roads leading to society, Lee Harvey Oswald's third great-grandfather, a Major Joseph Oswald, out of the Society of the Cincinnati chapter in Georgia. Joseph Oswald's second great-grandson, Theodore Roosevelt. His third great-grandson, Kermit, number 2 here, I guess. So my point being here is a lot of these matters we don't understand. They involve family feuds and disputes. The secret society that started America and runs it today. And also this guy's not, I confirm he's not a Muppet, despite being named after one.
Somebody in the chat, Jim Henson, tried to warn us.
Yep, exactly. Isn't that wild though? So let's ruminate on that real quick before we I want to get back to Daryl Gates. I'm glad you brought that back up. So we have a circumstance where Lee Harvey Oswald's father is very likely the hereditary member of Joseph Oswald in the secret society that started America and runs it today, the Society of Cincinnati. That man's third cousin. That man's third cousin. Lee Harvey Oswald's dad's third cousin. They have the same second great-grandfather, Joseph Oswald, was Teddy Roosevelt. So you have Teddy Roosevelt, who's a member of the Society of Cincinnati, but he's a honorary member, meaning he's a member by virtue of being president. He doesn't get to pass it down to Kermit, the Muppet, right?
Right.
But his third cousin Oswald does. So do you see where this might create some beefs, right? Some disputes.
Right.
On above their ideological factions, right? On above their anti-liberty factions, etc. There are other disputes. Again, I think that they go like that. I can give you another example, but I'll close it out here with us after we talk some more Daryl Gates on these matters here. I'll get back to another one to close out the conversation.
Of course. So one thing that I think is really interesting, kind of where I left off with Daryl Gates. So the California Supreme Court basically told him, yeah, you can't be doing this, dude. You can't. This is insane. And of course he got pissed at that. They told him that he had to destroy all it was 1.2 million dossiers that he had collected over a period, I believe 10 or 11 years. And basically what Daryl Gates did is kind of a baller move, although he's an asshole. He went into the Supreme Court and basically told them what he was going to do. And he said, yeah, instead of destroying all these dossiers, what I'm actually going to do is just sell them to a private organization.
Oh, that seems reasonable.
Right. So the Supreme Court of California turned around and said, Yeah, sure. Okay, that sounds good. So he sold them to a
Nice.
organization called the Western Goals Foundation. The Western Goals Foundation is a private domestic intelligence agency that was active in the United States, founded in 1979 by Major General John K. Singlob, I believe is how you pronounce his name.
Oh, John Singlob, another Iran Contra
Yes.
member, right?
Yes, sir. The publisher and so the people that founded it, Singlob, the publisher and spy, John H. Rees, and Congressman Larry McDonald.
Oh shit! Good old Larry McDonald, Mr. Tap
Yes,
his
sir.
foot for some queer stuff in the Minnesota airport bathroom. You know, he's also from that old state of
Yes.
Idaho, what I like to call Satan's butthole. Idaho.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, as a private foundation, I mean, the Western Goals just collected information about alleged subversives and passed information to law enforcement. They were basically dubbed a mini deep state. Is basically what they were named because of the way they operated.
That's probably an apt description, sir. But if we let's focus on this though. This man was not only involved in Iran Contra, he's a founding member of the CIA and the former high-ranking decorated officer of the OSS. So again, these are the folks that brought the Nazis here, right?
Right.
Same pattern.
And so this is who basically got all of those dossiers. This is who Daryl Gates teamed up with, basically, and this organization is who Western Goals Foundation is who basically took over Daryl Gates's police officers in school program. And then what ended up happening is this organization officially went defunct in 86. Well, what happened in 86 was the beginning of the DARE program.
There you go, sir.
So that's where all of
when
this
you brought
started.
this to my attention, that is such an intriguing throughput with the same, you know, again, Colby comes from that same OSS importation of those same Nazis. But again, these implicate and again, he learns the shit from Singlob and shit. That would be a mentor to Colby, but essentially they're all derivative of the same programs. He's what I like to call Colby's queers, not a commentary on their sexual proclivities, even though, like, look at Michael Aquino, you do the math,
right?
But the strange and anomalous nature in which the impact they've had on our nation, on America. And look at this one. This is a great example. You got direct money laundering campaigns of the same network of the Nazi fuckers imported them. The Colby's queer fuckers bringing the stuff home, and they're going to import all that into our schools. Well, that's very generous and kind of them.
Right. So basically what the DARE program was a intelligence operation that was meant for children to rat out their parents or anyone else in the school or their parents' friends or whatever. It was a way to be able to talk to kids from law enforcement.
Good. Yeah, I apologize. Yes, no, you're correct, sir. I was saying, oh shit, because I said, oh shit, because RR channel's correcting me, and you know, life's really in the dumps when RR channel's giving you the facts and you correcting me. But you're right. Larry McDonald was the one that had the mysterious flight death, right? I was thinking of Larry Craig. Different Larrys.
Hey, it happens.
Know your Larry. You know, as a JJ, I gotta tell myself, know your Larrys.
Right. But yeah,
no, I did that the other day with Jeffrey McDonald. You know, the U.S. Army Green Beret Special Forces medical doctor who allegedly murked his entire family in the middle of the night back in '70. The same place at Fort Bragg where Michael Aquino was. Just saying, at the same time, and a man who's had his justice and his rights violated, justice completely. You know, it's complete boondoggle. It's not justice because we see folks like we were talking about these matters of controlling all these narratives over the years. Man I like to call laser tag Ted Gunderson, who got involved. That was his first step after COINTELPRO was, hey, Satanism. I don't know anything about Satanism. That's literally what he said in the tune he played for decades. And then he got Alan Dershowitz, Mr. Pro Snuff Film, you know, Epstein buddy.
Right.
And another one of O.J. Simpson's Nightmare Team, not Dream Team, Nightmare Team. and Iran-Contra money launderer F. Lee Bailey.
Interesting.
Oh, you familiar with that narrative with the money laundering?
Yes, I am. Yes, I
Okay,
am.
well, I'll point that out in a second. And then the third attorney that gets associated with Jeffrey McDonald, not Larry, because I was calling him Larry McDonald the other day. It's a different. I need to know my Larrys. But
Right.
Jeffrey McDonald is John Markham II, the Process Church's literal attorney, and according to the files of Ed Sanders, a lay member on numerous eyewitness accounts. He's a member of the cult. He's the one who. This is the reason why Jeffrey McDonald sits, not Larry. Jeffrey McDonald still sits in prison today, in a federal corrections prison in Maryland and Cumberland, but with no more appeals because they expended. These men are the ones that made sure he's never going to get out of prison. And then John Markham II would later get Leslie Van Houten, convicted Manson family murderer, out on parole. So these are the matters we're up against, and these matters of controlled narratives, like that, right. And then propaganda, right? And for those folks of the interwebs that are not familiar with laser tag Ted Gunderson, let me help you out with that one.
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
They got Ted twice. Jacob. Watch out. So, it's one of my issues with that. Not only it's the presentation of all these claims without evidence, which he was notorious for, not the least of which this claim that he got shot with a laser tag. I don't even care twice, let alone once. Right? I don't see any evidence of that, but or the laser beams, but. We do see that these matters are being heavily controlled, and we do see a lot of the same connectivity because old Ted there would associate himself with a lot of Colby's queers, not the least of which was the Franklin scandal with John DeCamp.
Yes, sir. And it's really interesting. So during the McMartin preschool case, the parents actually got together and did their own independent investigation of the schoolhouse and the property and everything. They paid for an archaeological team to come in, and they found the tunnels. And what's really interesting is that it had nothing to do with Ted Gunderson, nothing at all, even though he was all.
You are spot on, sir.
But as soon as he got wind of them doing this, he showed up when they were doing the excavation of the property and tried to insert himself into every little thing possible. And that right there is a massive red flag to me. It's really interesting. I've heard.
You are correct, sir. If I may.
Yeah.
Also, we should note Daryl Gates was the LAPD police chief at this time. This happened in LA County, Manhattan Beach, not his jurisdiction. But I'm just saying these are the matters that are going on in LA at these times that. Daryl Gates is running these massive intel operations. Shouldn't they be considering more shit going on in his home jurisdiction? I would imagine, but
when you have hundreds of kids being abused in preschools all over your neighboring county.
Absolutely, not the least of which satanic serial killers popping off all over LA at the time. And we got Charles Manson's personal friend. And a defense attorney in the Manson trial for one of those girls. I don't think it was Van Houten. I believe it was Linda Kasabian. Anyhow, he was noted as a personal friend of Charlie. Charlie requested to the judge to have him represent Kasabian. And he was the district attorney from 84 to 92 there in Los Angeles. He's not the one who brought the charges in McMartin. The previous district attorney brought the charges. He did a press conference saying this has everything to do with child pornography and sexual abuse of these children. And then this fella would get elected about a month later. Who knows? I'm sure that was probably fixed, right? They bring in the fixer, and he's also the district attorney. He makes that a circus first and foremost. So you got him making it a circus. You got old Ted coming in on the side making it a circus. And Ted inserted himself into one of the victims' families, single mother, child had been abused. Jackie McGauley, nothing nice to say about Ted. You're right. She's one of the parents that hired the UCLA archaeological team to survey the site, and then Ted brought parents with shovels in the LA Times to make a big spectacle of it 2 days before the actual site was supposed to be surveyed. And this was during the second time they brought charges because this man right here was forced to bring charges. He also prosecuted the Hillside Stranglers, Richard Ramirez, the Cotton Club murder. Speaking of Cocaine Bob Evans, this is the man that decided Cocaine Bob Evans was an unindicted co-conspirator in the murder of Roy Radin.
Interesting.
Yeah, he had no problem indicting the Medellin cartel's number one person in America, Karen Greenberger, a.k.a. Laney Jacobs, Bob's co-conspirator, who hired, Mr. Process Hitman Manson II, William Metzer, these matters, I think are relevant because, they're going to charge the Medellin cartel. Speaking of all this Iran Contra stuff, that's their cocaine. They're contrabanding right through America.
Right.
And he charges the head of that cartel, but he, in America, they're top person in America, but lets Cocaine Bob walk. That should say a lot about who Cocaine Bob is and his power.
Right. William Menser, I believe he was actually connected to Ted Bundy as well. Supposedly there was a connection with some sort of satanic cult where they were actually killing alongside each other, or at least that's what he said when he was in prison.
No, I believe there's a lot to those matters, sir, because here's another fun fact, and this is a plug for Operation GCD and an Operation GCD Sundays I got coming up in a few weeks. Not only is Sharon Tate and Polanski involved in the RFK 1968 presidential campaign in Los Angeles, where he's later murdered by the process at all there in the Ambassador Hotel, and he had dinner with Tate and Polanski the night before in Malibu at a campaign dinner. At either John Frankenheimer's house or Peter Lawford's house. I'm willing to go to either one, but both of them lived in Malibu. There are disputes about the location. Either way, they were present. And then we see two other satanic serial killers on the 1968 presidential campaign of RFK in Los Angeles, one of which was their top campaigner. He got an award for it.
And check this out. And do you know who was in charge of the investigation with RFK? When he was murdered? I
actually don't know that.
Daryl Gates.
Get out of here, dude.
Yes, it was Daryl Gates, and he was the reason why a lot of the evidence, including I believe there was like hundreds of pictures that were taken, from photographers that were there for all sorts of different media outlets, were mysteriously gone. It's because he destroyed them all. So Daryl Gates.
That's wild, dude. That's what I was saying. That's what I was saying about what his service was. I actually looked it up. He served on the USS Alt in the U.S. Navy during World War II. Who did he report to? John S. McCain. John McCain, #1 member of the Society of Cincinnati.
Oh, geez, you can't write this stuff.
No kidding. And here's another fun fact regarding Mark Furman. So Mark Furman fits well within this LAPD national security enterprise of Daryl Gates, and worked for Daryl Gates most of his career. So he and again, we see this throughput of all these national security hood rat shit stuff popping off in Los Angeles with the same core group of individuals. For example, the first individual on scene at the Tate Polanski house was a fellow by the name of Richard Wally. One of the second or third individual on scene was a man by the name of Philip Van Adder. Philip Van Adder would be the man who arrests Roman Polanski when he becomes robbery homicide in 1976. Arrests Roman Polanski for the rape of that 13-year-old on the couch of Jack Nicholson's house, along with his other process buddies, Marlon Brando and Cocaine Bob and gang and whatever. But nonetheless, we see Polanski's the one arresting him there. Van Adder. We see Van Adder's the head of the Orenthal James Simpson case, which has everything to do with Iran-Contra drug operations. And that's why we see Bill Colby's son. Here you go, our channel. Bill Colby's son, Carl Colby, is one of the chief witnesses against Orenthal James Simpson.
Right.
So we see him. We see Van Adder, the one planting the evidence in that case, along with Furman. Now, Furman served on he was a Marine Corps MP in the early 70s, serving on ships transporting Bill Colby's queers from Philippines back to America on numerous occasions. So, not the least of which, they were also picking up all those Apollo missions in the oceans. When they fly back from the moon, they got to land in the ocean. Furman was on the ships picking those up.
Oh wow! Jeez.
So we see these throughput of these characters, and again, it's not shocking that Daryl Gates was involved in that Sirhan stuff, sir. I did not know that. I appreciate you bringing it to my attention.
Yeah, that's actually what really got him noticed, from being just like an officer on the beat, and what got him moved up is because he was willing to do things other officers were not.
That was his Polanski moment. That's what got Van Adder moved up. So here's another fun fact about the Orenthal James Simpson case. Aside from the fact that no one called 911 for an hour and a half, despite everyone hearing this murder, that's the story. How the story goes. There was over 13 eyewitnesses of it, but somehow the police said, "Oh, we didn't get a call for an hour and a half." And when they got there, the first officer on scene, Richard Wally, the same guy as the first officer on scene at the Tate Polanski house.
Right. Wow.
So-
What a coincidence.
Shocker, right?
Jeez. It's almost like these people do this for a living. You know? It's like they're really, really well trained at doing a lot of this super shady shit.
Yeah, it's a hood rat shit network, right? They all do hood rat shit, and they're all very good at working with each other, covering up, etc. And it all seems to
Right.
focus around Bill Colby's programs Come Home.
Right. Right.
So that's a great question. Thank you, Rosemary, isn't the armed occupation by Fed troops Trump suspending habeas corpus? And again, that's one of my beefs with Lincoln as well, sir. So I don't necessarily disagree with the negative aspect of these things, but this is again what I meant also by the Monday morning quarterback is and waiting for the dust to settle, because we don't really know what the fuck's going on here. What I can tell you though is a number of this place has gotten, with this RR channel character, this AI CIA ball washer Bill Colby. Again, I'm obviously joking. He's got a sense of humor. I appreciate his dedication, despite not agreeing on anything he says, because he's clearly way off base. But objectively speaking, what I'm saying here is we've been inundated with propaganda on all these matters here in America. There's obviously a lot of things going on impacting, the future and liberty therein. And we don't know what they're up against right now. And I'm not trying to ball wash Donald Trump or advocate martial law. What I am saying is, let's say you're an opposing force to America and you know that folks want to uphold American values. What would be the first thing you would do? Try to push them over that line, right?
Right.
How many cities in the U.S. have to burn before we start doing anything about it?
Right.
So I'm on the fence, but I don't like it. You know what I mean? But I also don't like cities burning like they did back in the Summer of Love and, celebrating the life and times of our Lord and Savior, St. George Floyd. I don't like to see these things go on here in America.
Right. So I always like to point out, I actually did an interview with a doctor on my channel. Her name's Dr. Carol Lieberman. It was definitely an odd interview. I appreciate her time, but I probably won't have her back. She was definitely nice though. However, she when she came on, the intro to my channel it's all MK Ultra related and has a lot of references to Jolly West. And
oh, nice. Okay.
When we started, she brought that up and she told me that she actually studied under Jolly West at UCLA. And of course, I was all over this. It's like, yes, tell me more, and she had zero clue with his connection to MK Ultra. And she was shocked. She had no clue. And
no
at
shit.
The time,
okay.
Right. And at the time, I started thinking, because I was just reading more about him, before I did that interview. And this is always something to keep in mind with all of these people, is that to some, Jolly West was just a normal guy. Like, he wasn't anything. He didn't brag about his connections. And a lot of these people don't. A lot of these people go home to their families, kiss their wife, eat dinner, take their shoes off and fall asleep in a rocking chair watching a football game or like whatever, like people are insanely complicated, even these like really terrible people. So there's a lot of people that speak really highly of Jolly West because they knew him from studying under him, or they worked with him at the college or something. But behind closed doors, this man was a monster. But people,
for sure, dude, for sure. No,
right.
You're making some excellent points, man. That's kind of what I was getting at earlier with, these things aren't black and white. There's a lot of gray areas in the manner in which these folks portray themselves throughout their lives. For example, the serial killer you may have heard of, sir, but most folks have probably not ever heard of, Ed, the most prolific serial killer in America, friends with Charles Manson, and very likely a CIA operative, much like Manson, Edward Wayne Edwards.
Yes.
No one would ever, there's not a single person in his life outside of his immediate family that ever had a negative thing to say about Ed, because he would never portray an image like that to anybody.
Right.
He was a fucking, not only was a monster, he was a monster of literally, dude, the most heinous and most prolific serial killer that we have the slightest understanding of. We don't even have an understanding of that understanding. It's a known, but we also have an unknown known that we don't know enough about that known. I like to think, and when I'm talking about psychopaths, I like to consider the mind of a psychopath. Or if I may just introduce what I'm talking about.
As we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't.
I mean, that psycho, old Donnie Rumsfeld there makes a lot of good points. And again, what you're saying, again, sir, I think is great because it's, again, is that gray area. And speaking of some other things relative to RFK, his buddy, one of his BFFs, and apparently a secret CIA agent the entire time he was U.S. congressman, a man named Allard Lowenstein, who himself was murked by a mind control assassin in his office in 1980. He was with RFK in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles in 68, BFFs with Donnie there from Congress. And when Lowenstein went back to his home office there in Long Island, the staffer that picked him up, member of the Process Church. Just saying, these things are relevant in these matters. That, you know, that Marxist organization is very, you know, professedly saying and devoutly saying they want to eradicate the bourgeois middle class. Look around. You know what I mean? Look around. Do we have a middle class anymore? I think that's what I'm saying. There's no arguments about fighting communism. They don't go anywhere with me, sir, because I look around, that's all I see are these same, you can call it again, Marxism, communism, socialism. You know, I don't get lost in the semantics. Speaking of the Church of Satan, Michael Aquino wrote in his autobiography of the Church of Satan in a letter with LaVey how they wish everyone to get involved in a battle of semantics when describing the characteristics and activities of their organization.
No, 100%. 100%. They want to get you lost in the weeds.
Yeah, I think you can apply that. I think that's a good concept to apply across the spectrum, is realizing these Nazi Satanist bastards, their words, not mine, both of them devout and Nazi Satanists. They want to deceive folks and then ensure folks are arguing about semantics rather than actually describe their activities.
Right. Well, and if they get you into the semantics, then they can usually get you frustrated. And once you're frustrated, you slip up. So that's one of the easiest ways for them to throw you off. So
if I may, sir, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that this is something when I'm talking to people about debate tactics, always just stay on topic, period. Don't get into the minutia. Always stay on the exact topic, because otherwise they will get you into the weeds. And, you know, I'm one of these people that like to argue online occasionally, especially on Twitter. And, you know, that's one of those things that I have to do, because otherwise, you know, we'll have threads just going on and on and on. But if you stay on topic, you can tell these people will give up really, really quick if they're trying to get you into the weeds.
No, dude, that is, again, I think that is much like Aquino and LaVey's site. That is their professed goals. So,
right.
And deception is their mode of operations. It is one of their key concepts, core concepts. So if I may circle us back there to Los Angeles, though, as we were talking about Daryl Gates, this all this Iran-Contra, DARE stuff, etc. Charlie Manson's friends, satanic serial killers like Richard Ramirez, who got a one-on-one meeting with Anton LaVey prior to his terror spree of satanic murder in Los Angeles County. And he learned to murder. This one's for our channel. Richard learned how to murder from his cousin and guardian, a Phoenix program assassin.
Yes, sir.
So Dave McGowan is right in many respects. But I do, when we were saying earlier about the getting blinded in politics, you know, I think McGowan, even to a certain regard, that qualifies for him as well. But he is the man that radicalized me in these actions. I just think I'm not accusing him of doing anything like Lavenda did in Sinister Forces. Peter Lavenda, fan of his work. I recognize the fact he's a Thelemite. He did so live on Discovery Investigation Discovery TV doing a thelemic ritual. But I think he's part of the Typhonian Order. Him and his buddy John Podesta, they go back to the 70s together.
Right.
So anyhow, but when I enjoyed Sinister Forces, don't get me wrong, but when he came at me in Sinister Forces Volume 3 with like a Shyamalan twist, blaming it all on the Republicans, I'm like, that's it. I'm having none of this. But that's what you were saying before about getting folks getting blinded. I think his blinding is a little bit more intentional, but you know, it is you know, it is certainly a shortfall in any respect. I have shortfalls in these respects too. I try to be objective about them as much as possible, but it is matters that do impact all these things. But when we see all of these matters circling back to, again, these programs being brought home, though, right? I mean, I think there's something to be said about that regarding the propaganda and our lack of understanding and the impact this has had on our culture.
Yes, sir.
Bill Colby, by the way, sir, third great grandfather, Captain Colby from the Massachusetts chapter of the Society of Cincinnati.
Interesting. Like I said, it just seems like they're everywhere.
They are. They're everywhere.
So
if go ahead, sir. I was going to bring us back to LA, but please continue.
Just real quick, that anytime I see that left-right division, it's the same propaganda technique. It's the same mind control. Because the most basic form of mind control is repetition. Period. And when I hear the same things over and over and over again, left, right, poor, rich, black, white, doesn't matter. It's us versus them, making an enemy out of one and a victim out of another. I just kind of got to take off my rose-colored glasses when it comes to that, because that right there, you can still get some good information. Like David McGowan, I'm with you. He radicalized me on a lot of this stuff. I love his work. I keep his books right over here in my stack, and I refer to his work a lot.
For sure.
However, I do see his blind spot with the left right. Same with Douglas Valentine. I see the left right, and I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but it's when you've got that blinder on of, oh, this was the right doing it, and then you have that blinder of the left, like you just leave them out, or you think they don't do anything wrong.
And I think part of that comes from 90s culture, if I may, sir. I think part of that came from 90s culture, where a lot of these folks, obviously McGowan and Valentine, that's obviously they're writing books, they're doing research during that time.
Right.
All of conspiracy culture in the 90s was all very left.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think,
I say that you get your right wingers and stuff. And again, I don't want to get into this whole argument whether or not white nationalists, right winger, Aryan nation fuckers, those Nazis are right wingers or left wingers, because it's in the name if you ask me. But and it's the authoritative control again. But if you ask me, that's all lefty stuff. But again, they call themselves right wingers. People do get lost in these things. I try not to, But I agree with what you're saying though. There is a certain aspect of this that weighs in folks' perspectives, right? It impacts their the lens in which they view the world through. Yeah, and to me, it literally just comes down to liberty or slavery. Those are the two sides that I see. You're either for freedom or against freedom. And I realize I just went on, this diatribe about, don't cut it into a two-system view, but it really is like you're either for the freedom of humanity or you want them enslaved. I agree, sir. I agree. In fact, I'm a big proponent of the views of George Washington's views on politics. He was anti-politics, anti any kind of politics, let alone two parties. And he, in fact, predicted the circumstances we're in today in 1796 by saying that if you do institute these parties, they will be used by unscrupulous men in which to wage control and tyranny across the nation, essentially, right? Yes, sir. His farewell speech was amazing. Yep. Absolutely. He thought he was Cincinnatus, the man in which the Society of Cincinnati is based off of. He was a general in the Roman Republic, not the Rome we know now, but the Roman Republic that preceded it. And he fought for the rights of the Republic, came out of retirement the second time as a general and did it. The same thing Washington did. He retired, came back as president. He viewed himself as a reincarnation of Cincinnatus. And you can see that in his farewell speeches where he's talking about giving power back to the people. And if you want to get real weird, Steve Bannon has been going around America telling everybody Trump's the modern day Cincinnati for the last couple of years. Really? That's one person I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to, although it seems like he keeps coming up. Office of Navy Intelligence. I did know that. I did know that. Dude, he's an interesting character. He's one of my favorites. Yeah. Well, and there's some weird connections to him and our vice president, the actual vice president, not you. You could just say everything. You could just say it's weird connections to Steve Bannon is the where's ball of conspiracy culture and parapolitics. Right. And
I never really gave him much thought until I just started seeing his name pop up everywhere.
Yeah, dude,
him-
he's a master of disguise. That Steve Bannon. He lays in
Right.
the shadows, looking like a slob, but wields an insurmountable amount of insurmountable amount of power.
Yes. Yeah, him and the other person that always shocked me was General Flynn. Which
Oh, yeah, Kino's buddy.
yes. The guy also involved in trafficking, but also leading like this Q charge to,
Well, that's
save the kids or
Aquino,
whatever.
right? That's Aquino.
Right.
So you got Aquino's old boss and co-author of Psyops to Mind War, General Paul Valle. I like to call him QAnon General, and he's again really closely associated with Flynn. But so is Aquino. So Aquino, I haven't really I do my Operation GCD Thursdays. I do the Anatomy of the Satanic Panic, and I like to do these 6 Degrees games. One, because actor Kevin Bacon asked for a new Patsy, and I like to do a Make-A-Wish for him, help him out. 2, because it helps understand the environment. Things don't happen in a vacuum. These folks come from places, and the environment they operate in is going to be very telling, and the folks they associate with. And when you look at stuff like what Aquino does and the folks he associates with, it gets very, very interesting. And his wife, his second wife, Lilith, not the Mormon one, the second wife, Lilith, there, the one he started the Temple of Set with, she would be best friends and claim to be sisters, although I can't find any evidence of that being sisters, with Colonel John Alexander's wife, who was the head of the non-lethal weapon stuff wrapped up in all the alien nonsense.
Right.
Really good friends with General Flynn. Really good friends with General Flynn and General Arthur Stubblebine, who brought us the psychological, the remote viewings, the men who stare at ghosts, the jackass who tries to run through the wall.
Right.
That's General Arthur Stubblebine. You go see him on Bill Hicks' show, InfoWars, too. He's done a lot of appearances on that before he died.
Bill Hicks. he is totally Bill Hicks.
Oh, dude. There's a few things I'm certain of in this world, and that is one of them, sir.
Yes, I would have to agree with you. I mean, and also, what the hell is up with him lately? Like, it seems like a body double or something, because, man, he just
I thought you were talking about the PG-13 gay porn conspiracy porn that he filmed with that one fella, the tall fella. They were sitting in a lake with their shirts off talking about aliens. I'm like, what is going on here? Ian Carroll.
Yes, Ian Carroll. Man, that dude, he is an op for sure. And don't get me wrong, I like some of the things he's put out.
Is it the Tom Selleck mustache? That was an indicator of me? I'm like, who is he fooling with this mustache? That's a Fed mustache. I've ever seen one right there.
Right. Yeah, it is a straight Fed cookie duster for sure. he I like some of the things he's put out, but to me, he's very guaranteed he is a Ted Gunderson type.
There you go, sir. There you go, sir.
Information agent, puts out good work and then puts out some bad work, and you just got to try and decipher what it is. And
there you go. That's it.
I think that's what Tucker Carlson is on these days. A straight information agent. It just.
You're spot on, dude. I get into these disputes all the time because I like to talk shit about old laser tag Ted, who, by the way, I do believe these rumors. I have yet to substantiate them, concretely, but it has been long rumored. I found these through discussion boards dating back to the early aughts that old Ted was shacking up with LaVey's first wife, the co-founder of the Church of Satan.
Oh,
who
really?
Makes a lot of sense. She was a PI and a handwriting expert in Las Vegas at the same time Ted was a Las Vegas PI.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
okay.
And speaking back to that McMartin situation, Jackie McGauley, that victim's mother that he fucking leached off of and inserted himself in to fucking violate that case and that family. She would say that she would report that for the 2.5 years that he mooched off her and lived at her house there in the late 80s, he talked to Michael Aquino every day.
Interesting. I think I remember you mentioning that on your show about the on your Thursday show.
And this is at a time, sir, during the infamous Geraldo primetime special where Aquino and Gunderson are facing off on a stage together, opposing one another, kayfabe WWE style, if you ask me.
Right. Yeah.
But to that point, go ahead.
Just that whole stage show is exactly what I would call
Yeah,
their Geraldo.
you got to have
event.
some facts, right? You can't say, look, as the laser tag Ted used car salesman bit, you can't be like, hey, do you want to buy this big pile of shit? You know what I mean? You got to
Right.
have some facts. So you make some good points. They get you down a trail. There's a fellow on the interwebs right now. He's been inserting himself in the Idaho situation. He's been a shit coder of Ted Gunderson, styles for many years on the interwebs, dating back
Right.
to the fake bombing incident hoax that he ran on somebody along with a paid FBI informant by the name of Okie Marshall Richards, a man from West Virginia. That man provides that state of disservice, West by God, Virginia. But Okie Marshall Richards and a fellow by the name of George Webb. And this dude, they instituted this fake bombing hoax. I put it on somebody back in 2017, and he's been going around shit coding all sorts of matters. I've been tracking this shit for years, but he's been inserting himself in the Idaho situation. I find very intriguing because what he's doing there. But for example, this is a good one. He walked into Comet Pizza in November of 2017 and said, "Oh shit," or 2016, at the height of the Comet Pizza business.
Right.
So I just talked. He comes outside on his video. He's on the ground, street reporter. So I just talked to the owner, James Elefantis. He's a good CIA guy. He's just running guns, no drugs, no kids. I'm like, is this guy fucking serious right now? Is this really happening?
A good CIA guy, no guns or no drugs, no kids.
He's a good CIA guy. He's not doing the kids, just the guns and not the drugs. Yeah, no
right.
Kids. So, but that is this character. We do have these Ted Gunderson type characters today who always make these weird. This dude shut down an entire bombing hoax situation, shut down an entire port of Charleston, trying to frame somebody else for it. No accountability for these matters. No accountability for their lack of production of evidence for all these wild claims they make. And lo and behold, his father appears to have been one of them Project Paperclip Nazis, and who, back to that whole pattern of behavior with these characters.
Right.
But we have a lot of these fellas that sell narratives that are clearly false, but they have to give you some truths to lead you down that false path. And I think you you're right on target there, sir, with that.
Yeah, and it's kind of like when Ian Carroll, he was doing a recent show. I saw the clip on Twitter where he was talking about if Tucker Carlson was CIA, and he said that, I don't know, he might be, and even if he is, so what?
Yeah, that's what they always say. When what's the CIA lady that got outed for starting a feminist movement? The lady that started the commie feminist movement in America has been confirmed to be CIA, and the conversation she tried to start once that was outed was, isn't that weird? We should talk about how weird that is. Is that weird to you guys? No, bitch, shut your mouth. You know what I mean? You commie bitch. You know what I mean? Like, these are the things they try to shape the narrative even then, dude. It's even like once they're out, they're like, oh yeah, isn't that interesting? We should talk about how interesting that is.
Right.
No, we should.
I mean, Jane Fonda was even outed as being involved with the CIA because, I mean, she was involved with feminism as well.
Gloria Steinem, Miss Magazine.
Yes, Gloria Steinem. Yes. Yeah, and I mean, she was funded through Rockefeller money, because the Rockefeller.
Aren't they all, sir? Aren't they all, sir? All of these ancient alien cargo cult bastards we see today, from Stephen Greer to Zachariah Stitchin to famed conspiracy culture man and Jehovah's Witness headquarters employee Jordan Maxwell, all financed. I think it's the financiers, I believe is what they call it, by the Rockefeller family. Lawrence Rockefeller, David, and Nelson.
Oh, somebody had pointed out to me, I wanted to make a correction. So the serial killer that Ted Bundy was connected to was Thomas Creech.
I was going to say yes, sir. Thomas Eugene Creech, who got his start at the Church of Satan headquarters there in San Francisco and New Levee and Aquino.
Yes, sir. And they were all part of the 4 Pi cult, which is process.
I agree, sir. And I think there's a lot to be said about that Bundy situation with that, and back to Edward Wayne Edwards. So 10 years prior to Thomas Eugene Creech's, think of it as a domestic Gladio situation, right? You can put it in that context. So this is a 10-year anniversary to, remind everybody of the terror from 10 years prior. Thomas Eugene Creech does the same thing 10 years after Edward Wayne Edwards in the same locations, including starting that campaign Bonnie and Clyde style by marrying a 17-year-old in Idaho Falls, Idaho. One in 1959, the other one in 1969. And Ed did it, I can confirm, as an operative of the CIA, because on that day in Idaho Falls, a place started under the Manhattan Project, by the way, that town.
Yes, sir.
It was very much for many years under those auspices. We were talking about that Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah before, these similar auspices of these national security towns out west, right? Well,
Right.
this is another one. And Ed has 2 different marriage licenses issued the same day by the same judge with the same notary stamp, etc. Same wife, same 7 Idaho Falls citizen. But one's issued under James Garfield Langley, Dr. James Garfield Langley, which were fake credentials. He was issued by
Right.
Ed's own admission in November of 1955 in Key West, Florida. Oh, that's weird. The CIA was with Castro in Key West, Florida, documented in November of 1955. And Ed would write in his own book that he was an operative of the CIA. No one wanted to believe him. I do, because the evidence supports that.
That's
He would
that's
go
also
to
at the
prison.
same that's also at the same time that John Papa Phillips was down in Cuba.
You're a wise man, sir. All of these fuckers know each other. I'm glad you said that. So before we, I appreciate your time. Thank you again for joining me here, sir, to get a little GCD. And I thank you folks of the interwebs. Like to give you, we're going to close this thing out, bring it in for landing. I got
of course
a couple of statements to make here before we do that. I want to, when I say they all know each other, I want to bring this back to LA. So we were talking about Kermit Roosevelt before, you know, Lee Harvey Oswald's third cousin. But we have a different guy. Speaking of Thomas Eugene Creech and the start of the Church of Satan, he would have known this guy. This guy, according to LaVey's second wife, what is called his autobiography, but written by her. Don't ask me. I don't know how that works out. But the grandson of not Teddy, but Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a William Donner Roosevelt, murdered his friend at the age of 10. And don't worry, he was only in prison for a couple hours. No big deal. He was one of the founding members of the Church of Satan.
Wonderful.
His wife, Ava Roosevelt, Ava Meyer, I believe was her maiden name at the time. This is before they were married, you know. This is when she was a young model. She was the protege to Sharon Tate. She claims she was supposed to be there that night. She would later marry that man who was the founding member, one of the founding members of the Church of Satan. These fuckers all know each other.
Interesting. Right. Well, and you got to remember, though, that Satanists are the only organization that would never abuse kids.
Yeah. Did Mike Aquino tell you to say that?
Well, you know, old Mike.
That is the propaganda script, right? But again, you look at the origins of their organization, and it's very dark.
Right. It is incredibly dark. I mean, Anton LaVey running guns and drugs. Like,
yes,
are you kidding me?
And his uncle was a made man of the Jewish mafia out of Chicago.
Right. Or the mafia.
Oh, yeah, well, that's what folks I think often misunderstand. It's my opinion, at least, that the Jewish mafia runs the Italian mafia.
Right. Well, and there's constantly kind of like, or at least there was, I'm not sure so much anymore, but there was a lot of fighting back and forth because a lot of those people definitely did not like being controlled. So, you know, that's why there was a lot of fighting within the families. And then, you know, the Jewish mafia would usually always come out on top. Go figure.
I don't doubt they fight each other. Much like all these satanic cults are egotistical, ceremonial, magician, Satanist, polemic, curly, eyeball washer bastards. And there's some elements of the mafia like that that fall in those categories. They're members of these same cults. But within the mafia, you know, again, I have no doubt these bloodlines and organizations feud amongst themselves and stab each other in the back and whatnot. But the one thing I will say, though, about those matters is they do seem to get along very well. They do seem to do a lot of weird occult rituals within the mafia stuff, too. But as far as the mafia stuff goes, it seems like even the origins in this country with the Cosa Nostra, dating back into the 20s and whatnot, it seems like, you know, you work for Meyer Lansky. I often joke today in America where we have no rights, we all work for the United Nations. We all work for the UN. But if you were in the mafia, you all work for Meyer Lansky. He didn't have any money on paper, but he owned everybody. And his operations got rolled up and owned today by, if you were to assume that he had all these blackmail operations under his, under his ownership and control, well, that's now under the ownership and control of one Donald J. Trump.
Right. Who ended up buying, what is that hotel in New York?
Resorts International, sir. Jimmy Carter Pate Company, Resorts International, Castle Bank and Trust, BCCI scandal, the Vatican Bank. All of these matters are part of the same conversation.
Right. Which is actually part of the reason why the mafia came down and the satanic cults stepped up and took over all the contract killing. Which, boom, satanic panic. That's why You know, it was an actual thing, not a fucking moral panic. It was an actual thing actually happening. Imagine that.
You are correct, sir. It's a real world, well organized, well financed operation to convince the American folks not to trust their own senses. Do pay no attention to those Satanists murdering your family and friends. Pay no attention to the Satanists ritually abusing your children. That's
Just
not
a witch
happening.
hunt. It's just a witch
That's not
hunt.
happening. You know? No, I mean, and again, it speaks to the nature of the spooky operations, the Phoenix program, Come Home, Colby's Queers, the matters of national security, et cetera, as they claim, these Nazi bastards. But no, so again, and we see, you know, the more and more I look at these matters, and as we've discussed here tonight, sir, it seems like a lot of these fuckers know each other.
Yes. Yes, I would have to agree because, I mean, how could you not? You know, that's the thing is if you're running all of these operations, just like, you know, to bring it back to the very beginning, Daryl Gates, when he's running intelligence operations around the world, how could you not run into CIA, FBI, DHS,
Right,
all of these other like?
That's what I'm saying. Who's he working for, right? Who's he doing that for? Who's
Right.
his daddy, and what does he do? It's the question I
Right.
like to ask.
Who's signing those paychecks?
And on that note, sir, I'd like to play that game here with you this evening. It's my favorite game here on Fridays. Who is your dad? Not who's your daddy, but who is like people like Daryl Gates, these people who impact our society and
Right.
cause great turmoil and queer natures and impacts in our society. Who is their daddy and what does they do? Because time after time, as I see, you know, when Lee Harvey Oswald's third cousins with Teddy Roosevelt, you know, I think these things matter.
Right.
You tell me, who is your daddy and what does he do?
What do you think, sir? Who is her daddy and what does he do?
You know, I don't know. First of all, who was that guy?
The guy
like,
kind of looks like a Muppet.
Yeah.
That would be Webster Hubble. He was almost the U.S. Attorney General during the first Clinton administration. He was the law partner to Hillary at the Rose Law Firm back there. It was Vince Foster, Webb Hubble, and Hillary at the Rose Law Firm.
So back when she was still a lawyer and she made that damning tape where she was talking about getting a sex offender off.
That's correct, sir. She was the law partner of Webb Hubble. So Vince Foster was friends with Bill. That's how he got linked up in the Rose Law Firm. They went back to high school or college. I don't remember one of the two. I think it was high school because Bill went to Georgetown and then Yale. So that probably wasn't it. So, but Webb and old Webb there and Hillary used to be a thing, and then they were law partners there, and then they brought in Bill's buddy. But I'm saying, she don't look like Bill.
Right. Well, there is a pretty legit theory, in my opinion, that there's some pretty compelling evidence towards the fact that Bill and Hillary's actual kid, was actually sacrificed. So
that wouldn't surprise me, sir, because in her own, I'm sure she didn't write it, autobiography, she says they went to Haiti, she and Bill did for their honeymoon for the voodoo.
Right. And this so happens to be around the time when they're leaving Arkansas, going to the White House. So,
yes, sir, that is correct.
What the hell? So, supposedly the first time when she was pregnant was when Bill was in the governor's mansion in Arkansas, running cocaine out of Mina and all of that fun stuff, and running kids, all of this stuff. And
I think she's born in 1979. So yeah, you're right. That was during it was either the end of his Attorney General administration or the very beginning of his gubernatorial administration.
Like right there somewhere.
Because he was the Attorney General there, right beforehand. That's when all these Colby's Queers drug running operations are going on. A lot of folks focus on the 80s stuff when he was the governor, but it really goes back to his Attorney General time. And he's got a photograph. So I can pull it up here, with George H.W. Bush in 1980, I believe, sitting alongside George Wallace, one of the Georges from the 70s, George Wallace, I think it was, and Kenny Bunkport, dude. So these fuckers all know each other.
Right. Yes, sir. So there's a book, if you guys can get your hands on it, I highly recommend it. It's called The Secret Life of Bill Clinton, The Unreported Story by Amber Rose Evans Picard. It is let's see if you can see that. Yep, right there. It is a phenomenal book, and it covers everything that he did while he was governor and also while he was the attorney general. And boy, is it very telling. That book's actually out of print now. So I mean, good luck finding it. But if you do find it, unless it's going to break the bank, get it because it tells a lot.
Yeah, dude, I've never heard of that book. That's awesome.
Yeah, highly recommended. I actually this came from a used bookstore, was only like $10, and it came from a library actually. So I'm not sure what library, but yeah, it's a highly informed book. It opens up a lot. All of the body count stuff, all of that's in there. So,
Nice. I was going to ask you about that in a minute, but so we're told these fellows just, after their presidents, they were like, oh, one's a Democrat, one's Republican. They decided to mend fences. These fuckers never quit running hood rat shit operations together. They have billions of dollars in fraudulent operations through unregistered charities they've run together. Not the least of which the Bush Clinton $10 billion Haiti charity hoax, dude. These matters are very relevant today to understand that these folks have always been doing it together.
Right. It's kind of like it reminds me of that scene from the cinematic masterpiece Lethal Weapon, where they're
fantastic cinematic masterpiece.
Yes, love that movie, especially the first one. I mean, I love all four of them, but the first one especially, and where one of the lawyers is talking about how he was part of Phoenix and they were running drugs and everything, and how they came back, still had their connections, so they kept running drugs.
That's right, sir. That is Bill Colby's queers as depicted in the film, the 1987 cinematic masterpiece, Lethal Weapon. They describe it in your face hole. The Phoenix program come home with the serial killers. They got Gary Busey and Mel Gibson, two feuding sides of the Phoenix program, serial killers. You got the banker, a friend of the father of the woman that gets murdered. She gets the hot shot at the beginning. The hooker, the lady involved in the hooker prostitution porn stuff. She's the daughter of a banker who's running the money laundering operations for this ongoing enterprise of Air America. They tell you right there, it's called Air America. They even say Air America. So yeah, these things are
blew my mind.
That's why I unpack these things of an occult and esoteric nature in my film reviews on Wednesdays, and I appreciate you tuning in, sir, as you cited the cinematic masterpiece written by Shane Black, the great buddy cop director and writer there, but. We do see these matters right in our face holes, and I think sometimes it's because it's in a film. It's like, oh, did you watch that in Lethal Weapon, buddy? Is that why you're saying these things? I mean, they even talk about like using the bombings and the domestic terror, dude. Like it's all in there. Our channel should really study that film now that I think about it. Right, our channel should really watch Lethal Weapon again because I think they'll learn a lot.
Yeah, when Mel Gibson brings up the mercury switches, which is a real thing, by the way.
100%, dude, and that was invented during the Phoenix program.
Exactly. And he just goes on that whole diatribe how he's never seen anything like this since the war, and he was with a lot of guys back during Vietnam, and these were real professionals coming in. It's I can't remember the exact term he used, but it was like some real scary shit or something like that. And
we see them blow up a fucking house, domestic terror, Operation Gladio style, in the middle of South Central.
Yes, sir. And I find it interesting too that the witnesses that they ended up talking to were children. I just found that a little weird. It's like all of it. It's just like you said, right in your face. And
in your face, old dude.
It's interesting because people will say, yeah, you saw that on a movie or whatever. Well, as a longtime artist, that's kind of how I started, in my early when I was 19, 20, started in tattoo shops and stuff. So, I've been an artist my whole life. And
Oh, that's awesome.
the question always is does art imitate life, or does life imitate art? And of course it's both. However, there's many, many times that art imitates life. And many times that is the case with film, because film is nothing but an art form. It's a really difficult art form too, but it's just really interesting that they will take these things, put them into film, and you watch it, and all of a sudden, if I start talking about, if I just say 4 things that the CIA did, I'm a nutcase, right? Throw it in a film, and all of a sudden it's like totally believable for some reason. I don't get it. There's a disconnect there, but.
Well, I know when we continue more of these future conversations on a future Operation GCDs, or if I join you over there on your show, sir, on similar topics,
Yes, sir.
I will like to talk to you about these matters such as you just described. Here's a fine example of what you just described. Lauren Singer, the guy who wrote this story, Parallax View, was an OSS guy, working with Bill Colby, getting all them Nazis in America and whatnot. And we see this film, if you look at the matters around JFK and the company Permindex, Permindex is basically this company, this corporation, international corporation, as depicted here in this film, that is hiring mercenaries, these assassins, to go murk their political opponents in various nations and presidents. So weird that we get that from an OSS CIA guy, Lauren Singer, though, right?
Yeah, really, really weird. Really
Super
strange.
Weird. Almost as weird as why we'd find George H.W. Bush, George Bush #1, as I call him. I got my Georges right. I might have a Larry conundrum here, and I might have a conundrum with getting Bill Paxton and Bill Pullman. I realize they're distinctly separate individuals. I oftentimes get them conflated, but my Georges I'm good with. George Wallace at a barbecue in Kennebunkport, Bill Clinton in 1983. Get the fuck out of here, dude.
Yeah. Jeez, yeah, they all know each other.
These fuckers all know each other, man.
Well, I mean, they were all mafia families, right?
Well, exactly. So speaking of that, old Slick Willie said, "You know what, Webb? You're my daughter's biological father. I'm going to get you a job in D.C." It's his wife's slam piece or whatever that's going on there, his law partner. So they appoint him as attorney general, and U.S. Congress says, "You're going straight to jail, buddy. Do not collect $200. Do not pass go." This dude's a criminal of all sorts of regards. I mean, they all are with the Clinton campaign, but.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
This is obviously the daughter of Webb Hubble, who still, despite their differences, him and Bill still they golf today.
It's almost like, the whole left-right thing is just for the cameras.
Absolutely, dude. And speaking of cameras, can you find a camera that doesn't make Webb Hubble's daughter, Rebecca Hubble, look any more like Chelsea Clinton?
No kidding.
That's not Chelsea 2 times. No, that's not double Chelsea, sir. That is Rebecca Hubble and Chelsea Clinton.
See, Chelsea Clinton. That's funny. I thought it was Chelsea Clinton 2 times.
Oh no. I want to make sure that distinction was made. So Chelsea Clinton is speaking of who's your daddy, what does he do? We see these folks carrying on these multi-generational hood rat shit empires. She's on that list. First of all, I think she got a PhD in diarrhea. I'm not making that up. Not even a medical way, like a sociological study of which. Anyway, that's a weird picture to her interest, right? But she sits on the board of a number of corporations, not the least of which International. I don't remember the name of it. IAC, who is a company that owns all of the underlying software for things like booking every hotel, despite the website goes through Expedia and IAC. All these dating applications, the fundamental software is all owned and by IAC. They also own a number of the apps. It was a company started by Barry Diller. He is the protege of Cocaine Bob Evans. When Cocaine Bob left Paramount, he handed off the reins to Barry Diller.
Wow. And all of these guys are data brokers now.
And they all know each other. And Chelsea Clinton sits on his board there. And she's an expert in shit, literally. Diarrhea. Not even, I mean, say that in a loose sense. Loose like the study of her diarrhea she's into.
Well,
but no.
they've got to have an expert when they're, into all of these like occult orgies and everything. They got to know what they're ingesting.
So she's linked up with the WHO because the WHO and Tedros there who's linked in with
Right.
the parents. Tedros and WHO is financed by, I think that's how you say it, financier, by Bill Burt Gates. From Microsoft fame.
Right.
So Bill Burt is the Clinton Foundation is one of the largest financial frauds in America,
Oh, yeah.
the world's history. The Clinton Global Initiative, which was helped started by Jeffrey Epstein, according to Alan Dershowitz,
Yes,
that
sir.
lovely character. But we see these folks are really a subsidiary of Bill Burt Gates. So he finances like 70% of the WHO, the WHO, not the band. Well, maybe the band too, but the WHO and Tedros, which Chelsea
Right.
Clinton, their diarrhea operations, do a lot of work through. And we also see that the WHO donates, I think, something to the tune, it's hundreds of millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. And we also see
Right.
Bill Burt doing the same thing. So literally all of the Clinton Foundation money, or like 80% of it, comes from Bill Burt.
Right. Who also has his own foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Well, that's where it comes from. So they funnel that through there, and that's where Warren Buffett, Seth Rich's buddy, that's where Warren Buffett, the guy lives in Omaha and suspiciously never comes up with the Franklin scandal. I find that weird.
Right.
But I feel like someone's obscuring that name from the record, if you will. But anyway, he donated all of his money to the Bill Burt Foundation.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but when he wants money, Bill Burt cuts him a check.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, probably added it to the the trust fund.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What kind of dark shit they got on Warren Buffett, the inventor of the buffets? What do they got on that dude that he's going to donate, 50 or whatever, $80 billion or whatever the fuck it was to name a number, $1 billion to the Bill Burt and Melinda Gates Foundation? What kind of dark shit do they have on him that's going to cause him to do that?
I always wondered about him because I saw this video, and people can go look it up. It's interesting because Warren Buffett goes and talks about how what he has for breakfast every single day, and
is it
one
children's
of his
blood?
Surprisingly not. It's actually, well, I don't know. It might be ground up people because one of his choices is McDonald's.
There you go.
It's a McDonald's breakfast sandwich and a Coke.
Yeah.
And
I don't buy that routine from, I drink a Coke, I eat a Dairy Queen, I live in the same house I bought in 1957 in Omaha. I don't buy that. That's the routine I'm talking about. That dude's got some skeletons in his closet, sir.
Right. So I don't buy all of it, but I do buy the breakfast thing. And the reason why is because it's so normal. And it's like normal to the point of just being scary, Like he's that normal guy that is so normal, something's wrong.
That's the part that creeps me out, though. I see what you're saying, but the part that creeps me out is he's trying to act so. When you try to act so normal, you got some shit wrong with you, bud. You're hiding some real dark shit. Look at Mike Pence. Oh, I don't have a meeting with another woman in the room unless my wife's there. What kind of shit have you been up to in behind closed doors, bud? You know what I mean?
No kidding.
That's some dark shit, dude.
And why would you announce that too?
Yeah, why would you be David Levitt and say, "Hey, I don't rape, my wife and I don't rape and or eat children"? It's the same difference, right?
Yeah, no, it does.
I wanted to bring that full circle for you as we bring this in for a landing.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's just really weird, coming in and just being normal like that. I find it suspicious as all hell.
Dude, I think those folks want to, murder folks and wear their skin as a human coat. Like one of the funniest things I see going around conspiracy culture and the interwebs right now is Garth Brooks is a serial killer. I don't doubt that for a second. Look at that motherfucker. He's a fucking weirdo. He's a total creepster.
That started as a joke, or at least started as a joke on, Tom Segura's podcast.
Right.
And
he's got some skeletons in his closet too, doesn't he?
Yeah. Tom Segura himself is also an interesting character.
Is this cult warfare we're looking at? Is that what we're looking at? A couple cults warfaring each other?
I kind of think so.
Death cults?
I kind of think so. It's just look at some of Tom Segura's jokes. Sometimes the funniest things are the truest things, and he has some odd jokes.
His entire friend circle is Neo Processor, including Joe Rogan's, Duncan Trussell's, all these characters, right? And Bert Kreischer's father is the man who helped L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology invade America. He was the
Yes.
attorney for
Oh, yeah.
L. Ron Hubbard, a real estate attorney in Clearwater, Florida, that helped Scientology aid and abetted their invasion of America. And I do call it an invasion.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would have to agree with you on that. Although I will say, out of all of them, I do think Bert Kreischer's the funniest, and I realize that that's a really controversial opinion. But I think he's about the only man out of all of them that have made me laugh to the point of almost.
I agree with you, sir. I drink beer with Mr. Bert Kreischer about 7:30 in the morning on St. Patty's Day in Washington D.C. in circa 2008. It's a
Hell
good
yeah.
time. He was the MC at a St. Patty's Day party at the local rock station. He was friends with the morning DJ. That's how I encountered Bert Kreischer. And this is before he started taking his shirt off, I think, officially on stage, but he don't think he had a shirt on all day that day. So it's a good time. That I do enjoy some of his comedy. His stuff anymore, though, is a little rough, in my opinion. He's got a little too Hollywood, but that happens because he's in that Scientology machine because his sisters are executives in Hollywood, courtesy of Scientology, I imagine.
Yes,
Bert
sir.
got his start in Hollywood, courtesy of Will Smith, then Scientologist. And again, I don't know if he realizes it, but he's steeped in all of these matters, if you ask me. But I do agree. He's I certainly find him comical. Did you know that Tom Segura started off as a Portuguese translator for the show America's Most Wanted?
I did not know that, and that is hilarious.
Yeah. And creepy if you think about it, dude. I think John Walsh is a dark fucking character. His daughter seems to think so.
John Walsh, so her and I follow each other. I've never spoken to her. But I've looked at a lot of the things that she has talked about and looked at it on my own, and it seems to be pointing that way, honestly. And honestly, it would be the perfect cover.
One thing she says is Hunter Biden went through some dark shit along with her parents, or apparently close with Team Biden there. And she apparently witnessed, along with some dark shit she went through along with Hunter Biden up there in the Finger Lakes area of New York, where Hunter Biden creepily has the Finger Lakes tattooed on his back.
Right. Well, and the Finger Lakes has like a lot of really odd paranormal activity going on up there.
For sure, because it has a lot of mounds, sir. And my general thesis there is weird shit happens in and around mounds, including the foundation story of the Mormon Church right there at the Finger Lakes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, there's many weird things, including alien sightings and Bigfoot sightings. So,
Absolutely.
So,
well, I'm glad we could circle back here to our favorite PhD crack doctor here at Operation GCD, and one of my favorite criminals here in this country. Well, one I hope to see finally come to justice, because I've witnessed a lot of shit that I didn't care to witness, and stuff that absolutely is criminal. And back to that whole accountability thing. Anyhow, my point being is, I do thank you, sir, for your time and your conversation here. Join me here to get a little GCD. And your attempts to out JJ may have been successful. Once again, sir, you have blown my brain hole on a couple of these topics. I like to leave here with new details and new tabs, and you sort of achieved in those measures and matters. So if you can offer us any closing statements on tonight's conversation, any final plugs?
Yeah, of course. The best place you can find me is pretty much anywhere that's Rise to Liberty. You can find me on Instagram, Telegram, and Twitter or X. Those are the places that I'm most active. Otherwise, you can find my shows on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, all the places. Because of the censorship, our big tech overlords, I've had to make sure that there are backups and backups for the backups.
Yes, sir.
And everything. So,
F&A, you're right. We all, what I like to joke is we have no rights here, sir, in America in 2025.
Yes,
in our
sir.
Muppet world, we all work for the UN now. In fact, you're out of the UN uniform regulations. I hope you fix that next time.
Yes, sir. And other than that, thanks for having me on, dude. I had an absolute blast. This was fun. So we'll definitely have to do this again, because boy, do I got some more information on this whole DARE stuff for you. LAPD organization structure and timeline of LAPD corruption and stuff that aligns with all sorts of things. So we'll definitely have to continue this conversation. And anyone else, I've got some fun stuff coming up. So head on over to my channel, make sure and subscribe, because unfortunately YouTube likes to make sure that they don't announce anything that I do. So, you'll have to keep an eye out for that. But I've got all sorts of satanic panic stuff coming up. I'm covering Laurel Canyon, And my big thing that I'm working on is an expose to the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, because fuck all of those guys. So thanks again for having me on, dude.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. You just hit on all the topics I enjoy talking about. I agree with Recon Scout. We'll have to convene on these JJ matters again in the future.
Anytime, dude. Anytime.
And what you're saying here about these False Memory Syndrome Foundation stuff, these psychiatrists, as I call them, they are very relevant in matters today relative to the process. Mr. Lucien Greaves, aka Doug Mesner, was a graduate of Harvard in matters of false memory and worked with the false memory syndrome. Runs a process.org website. Has a process church tattoo on his arm, and by his own admission is the intermediary third party between the old process and what they call the neo process. So
yes, sir. And
these false memory syndrome foundations and the satanic panic is still very relevant stuff today.
Yes, sir. Him and the Satanic Temple is actually carrying on what the False Memory Syndrome Foundation started. Him and his goons are carrying it on.
The Gray faction.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so I will be, exposing them. Also, something I'm working on behind the scenes is actually a series about Satanism itself. I don't see too many people actually cover it. And, because I was a Satanist for about 10 years, have quite a bit of knowledge of that. So I'll be going through that. Last place to check me out is my Substack. I'm actually getting ready to set everything up and be more active over there, although there is some good stuff over there right now for free. So,
well, nice. And I'll get all your whatever show notes or links in the show notes I don't have already for your stuff. I'll get in there for folks if the interwebs to check out. Definitely look forward to a future conversation. This is an interesting comment. Submarine lines in the Finger Lakes. Never thought of that. Appreciate it.
Oh, and that ties to Ghislaine.
Well, yes, sir. It does. Absolutely. So, no, that's all great stuff. In fact, I would like to talk to you, discuss in the future regarding some collaborations, and perhaps you joining me on one of my Thursday shows to discuss some of these matters of the anatomy of the satanic panic and the Satanism in general. Because obviously you have done a lot of research and understanding some of these matters, how they relate to conspiracy culture, and again, things of a spooky nature, like Colby's Queers Phoenix program Come Home. Again, it was Dave McGowan that radicalized me in these matters, and not just in the matters of Program to Kill and the pedophilicity, but also in his weird scenes inside the canyon. So that's what it was, in fact, a statement he made in an interview in a podcast about 10 years ago that said, well, when the podcast host asked him, said, well, does this weird scene stuff apply to any other, or the, music scenes and like grunge or something? And he said, well, it's not my scene. And his scene was the hippie culture scene of the Laurel Canyon of the 60s. And he said, but it probably did. And I said, well, shit. So I extrapolated the salient characteristics from weird scenes inside the canyon, applied it to my favorite countercultural rock scene there and the grunge scene, and holy fucking shit, dude. It's the same thing.
Oh, boy.
These people all know each other.
Right. Do I got a lot of stuff that we could talk about there as well? Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love also being tied to the hippie culture and everything. And one last thing, and I think
you ain't kidding, sir. You ain't kidding.
I think I'll end on this. It's actually my favorite quote from Dave McGowan. And at this point, I do not believe in coincidence. And the thing that Dave McGowan said was that, how many coincidences does it take to make a conspiracy? And, with that, I just don't believe in coincidence anymore. So.
Oh, for sure. Like Anton LaVey and John Travolta just happened to be on the same set of the same film when Travolta just became a corporate Satanist in Scientology. That's strange.
Oh, isn't that strange?
That's not a coincidence? Okay.
No.
I totally agree with you, sir. And again, I'm very, I'm not besmirching McGowan on his political, things that weighed heavily or had any implications in his viewpoints. But because, again, the man makes some excellent points. I'm a big fan of his research and work, and again, super fan, in fact. And in fact, again, we wouldn't be having this conversation if I didn't discover that man's work. And glad to see us fellow JJs thinking alike in that regard. And folks, the interwebs can check out Operation GCD Thursdays on those tales of the anatomy of satanic panic, Muppet Mikey Aquino, and the Phoenix program Come Home. Weaponized folklore, weaponized religion against the American public, and that's what we see in these Satanist operations. And then as well, we got coming up this Sunday, it's not Thomas Eugene Creech, but a different killer of a different regard in Idaho, aka Satan's butthole, in Latell County, prosecuted by fault, in a very violated this man's rights. He's a muppet, Dale Shackelford, hard man to defend given his other aspects in life. But I don't think, by all indications, he did not murder his ex-wife, nor Chuck Palahniuk's father, the author of Fight Club. This man's in prison today in Idaho for the murders of Fred Palahniuk and allegedly this man's ex-wife. Although his ex-wife had a hysterectomy, and the dead lady in the burnt up cabin with Fred Palahniuk in Latell County back in 1999 had a uterus, and Dale's ex-wife had a hysterectomy. So I don't know how these things work, but the same framework of prosecutions and fabricating a murder case against old Dale Shackelford here by the prosecuting attorney of the county, Bilbert Thompson, is the same framework he used recently in the Idaho 4 case against Brian Koberger. So a lot of interesting parallels, some interesting process connections here when you start talking about the Palahniuk situation and the Fight Club situations with that Neo process. So that's coming up here on Sundays. And then I got Operation GCD Wednesdays, this next Wednesday's, an occult and esoteric review of The Goonies. And I'll have to get you here, sir, on a future occult esoteric film review. It sounds like you enjoy film as much as I do, and you have a deep knowledge of these occult and esoteric topics. So I certainly would appreciate your input and participation in the future. But 1985 cinematic masterpiece, one of my favorites. Josh Brolin killed it in this film. My favorite Goonie, The Goonies.
Oh yeah, wonderful film, and yeah, dude. Anytime, this is pretty much what I do all the time. So like I said, I got a lot on my plate, but I've always got time for good people, and you're good people.
I concur, sir. I appreciate, share the same sentiment. I appreciate your time, and I thank you for joining me to get a little GCD. We'll definitely have to convene on some of these JJ matters again in the future. And thank you, folks of the interwebs, for joining us to get a little GCD. I find all of Jacob's links here in the show notes. And
thanks, everybody.
Any last alibis or any plugs?
Just keep an eye out for what I've got coming. I've always got some cool stuff in the works, and actually, I do have an interview coming up on the Free Thought Project with Jason Bassler coming up in October. So that's going to be fun.
That sounds interesting. And I have one at last alibi too for folks of the interwebs.
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
They got Ted twice, folks. Watch your six. You be aware of your surroundings. There's laser attacks apparently. Catch you next time.
Well, that's it. That's the show here, folks. So the next time you're out on the town, visiting your local watering holes, or perhaps just meandering around, and you hear the unmistakable sounds of metal clanking, and you spot signs of a disturbance, then check your six. Look in that garbage can, because you never can tell. The GCDs may be loose in your town.